Blue Dragon Emperor, Lord of Thunder. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 26 Family 1 2023-05-21 Author Pure Milk. Chapter 26 Family +1. Staring at the Tauran chieftain who lowered his head in front of him, Longen said loudly, "Submit to me. Submit to the great Lord of Storms. I will give you the land to live on and the shelter of the real dragon, and all you need to do is to be loyal to me, and be loyal to me." The angry and sorrowful Tauran chieftain clenched the stone axe. He wanted to use the axe to chop off the scales of the real dragon in front of him and tell the real dragon with practical actions that the Tauran will never be enslaved. But he couldn't. Behind him were nearly 100 injured Tauran warriors and more than 300 female Tauran and cubs. As a chieftain, he had to be responsible for them. The entire tribe had paid the price for its impulse once, and they could no longer bear the second price. The strong body of the Tauran chieftain trembled slightly in the fierce struggle in his heart, but he never opened his mouth. After listening to the battle between the Tauran and the hill giant, Longen began to admire the brave and responsible Tauran chieftain in front of him. Therefore, he did not release the dragon's might, but watched it quietly. Longen believed that it would make the right choice in its heart. As time passed, the Tauran chieftain's breathing became heavier, and its struggling heart gradually loosened. For the lives of its people and the continuation of its tribe, it decided to surrender to Longen. Suddenly, two more shadows flew above them, and then two real dragons, one gold and one silver, circled and landed beside the blue real dragon known as the Lord of Storms. Three real dragons. The heavy breathing of the Tauran chieftain was choked for a moment, and he immediately knelt on one knee with his stone axe and said, "The Wildhorn tribe swears allegiance to you, the great Lord of Storms." Long called Guerrilla and Videlpin to prevent any accidents. If they couldn't reach an agreement, the Tauran would go crazy and many of his men might be killed or injured. He didn't expect that the other side would decisively choose to surrender as soon as the two dragons showed up. When the Tauran chieftain swore allegiance, all the Tauran lost their fighting spirit, and Long said, "My people have never been slaves. What I need are courageous warriors. Follow me, and the name of Crazy Horn will resound throughout the places my dragon wings can reach. Perhaps hundreds of years later, your descendants will be grateful for the decision you made tonight, because of your loyalty, the glory of Crazy Horn will resound throughout the world along with my real name." The Tauran chieftain looked up at the real dragon in front of him, and saw the firm and confident dragon eyes. He believed that they might really be able to revive the glory of the Crazy Horn tribe under the command of a real dragon, and perhaps bring the Crazy Horn tribe to unprecedented heights. "The first thing you need to do to become my clan member," Long said with a smile, "I need you to witness the destruction of the hill giants." The hatred in the heart of the Tauran chieftain was ignited by Long. "Great Lord of the Storm, please be sure to let the Wildhorns tribe participate. Only by letting our sharp horns be stained with the blood of the enemy can we eliminate our blood feud with them." It was inconvenient to move at night. After dawn, the Wildhorns tribe moved to the dragon's nest under the guidance of the goblins. Long allocated a large area of woodland near the goblin settlement to the Tauran for settlement. After being convinced that their tribe would not become slaves, all the Tauran were slightly relieved. With the food and water delivered, they felt that maybe it would be nice to follow a powerful real dragon. After settling the tribe members and letting them start building their homes, the Tauran chieftain followed Ryan, who came to summon him to Long's dragon's nest. "Greetings to you, great Lord of Storms." Longen had just finished constructing another spell structure, so he put away the book in front of him and nodded, saying, "Sit anywhere, don't be so restrained. By the way, I don't know your name yet." "My name is Sorta Crazy Horn, sir." Sorta squatted down and reluctantly sat on the largest stone stool in the cave. "Sorta?" Longen looked up and down at the tall minotaur with grey fur and blood-red hair and said, "A good name. It suits your temperament very well. Let's talk about the situation of the Crazy Horn tribe first." "Yes," Sorta said, "the entire Crazy Horn tribe currently has 94 minotaur warriors, 36 of whom are seriously injured, and the rest are slightly injured and can still participate in the battle. There are also 217 female minotaurs and 104 cubs. As long as the minotaur has not died, even if he is very old, he is counted as a warrior, so Sorter's report does not include the number of elderly minotaurs. Even if necessary, female minotaurs and minotaur cubs can pick up weapons and fight the enemy and transform into minotaur warriors on the spot. This is a martial race, where everyone is a soldier. Long N nodded and said, herbs, food, and building materials can be provided to you first. If you need anything, you can tell Ryan directly. In addition, Ryan, arrange for the kobold warlocks and dragon chanters with healing abilities to treat the seriously injured minotaurs. Yes, Lord Long N. Ryan accepted the order. Praise your kindness, great master. Sorter bowed his head sincerely. Long N asked about the hill giants again. After hearing the news that many hill giants were also killed and injured, Long N let Sorter and Ryan leave first. Including the shaman, there are only 87 hill giants in total. Every death is a major weakening of strength. The Crazy Horn tribe paid the lives of nearly 100 tribesmen, and at least more than 20 hill giants were killed and injured. The casualties of the minotaurs reached 1/2, and the hill giants almost reached 1/3. They were not doing well. Long N's pressure was greatly reduced, but as long as the hill giant shaman was not dead, Long N could not take it lightly. The primary goal now is to explore the specific situation of the hill giants, but they have occupied the valley where the minotaurs once lived. If they keep hiding in the valley, it will not be easy to deal with them. The only people under Long N who can perform the exploration mission are the short, flexible and agile kobolds, but the wargs domesticated by the hill giants have very sensitive sense of smell and hearing, and are also very fast. I'm afraid that the kobolds will be detected by the wargs as soon as they approach the valley. Unknowingly, the number of Long N's followers exceeded 3,000, but there were only 3 races: goblins, kobolds, and minotaurs. Some special tasks can be barely handled by them, but compared with professionals, they are still far behind. If it were a natural scout race such as elves or cat people, it would be easy to find out the situation of the hill giants. There was really no other way, so in this situation, Kirelia and Videlpin had to do it. In the sky, even if they couldn't find out the situation of the hill giants in the valley, they could barely figure out their movements. As for Long himself, he was preparing to construct a 5-ring spell. Chapter 27 Dragon Blood Transformation Ceremony. The curvature change range is controlled between, and the advance amount is preset. Damn. The almost formed spell structure suddenly collapsed in the last few steps, and a chaotic storm rolled up in Long N's mind. The vision was upside down and shattered, the perception was reversed and distorted, and everything in front of him was spinning. Long N maintained his will, and mobilized a large amount of mental power to extinguish the source of chaos in his mind. The backlash of the failure to forcefully construct the 5-ring spell finally gradually disappeared, and the perception distortion caused by mental confusion gradually calmed down. The twisting amplitude of the rotating cave slowly became smaller. Long N, whose blood vessels in his brain were throbbing, closed his eyes and said depressedly, "Why can't I succeed? Obviously, my mental power is sufficient." This was Long N's second attempt. The first attempt also failed in the same way. There was no problem with the construction steps, and the mental power was sufficient, but the spell structure would inexplicably collapse. No, it seems that the 5-ring spell cannot be mastered for the time being. Long N shook his head and walked towards the exit of the dragon's nest. It seems that this is the only way. Long N spread his wings as he walked and came to the protruding platform in front of the cave entrance. With his wings flapping up and down, Long N leaped into the sky and flew towards a nearby mountain. When he arrived in front of Kirelia's lair, Long N walked straight in. It was his first time to visit Kirelia's lair. From a human perspective, this lair was very natural and warm, but from a real dragon's perspective, poor. There was no treasure piled on the ground paved with mud and stone, and it was so clean that the dragon felt pitiful. Not seeing Kirelia's elegant and silver figure in the dragon's nest, Long N wondered, isn't it Videlpin's turn to monitor the hill giants today? Where is her dragon? Knock knock. The sound of fingers knocking on the wooden door drew Long N's attention back. Kirelia pushed open a hidden wooden door, and she looked at Long N in human form. It is very offensive to break into a lady's bedroom without permission. Long N then noticed that Kirelia's nest was divided into a cave large enough for a real dragon to move around and sleep, and a room for resting and reading in human form. Sorry. Long N apologized casually and changed the subject. I have decided to use the dragon blood transformation ceremony. This is the fastest and most effective way for us to improve the strength of our clan now. Have you decided? Kirelia thought for a moment, put her left hand on her chest, supported her right elbow on her left hand, and rested her chin, and agreed. That's right, but you have to use your own blood. If you want to use my and Videlpan's blood, you have to charge according to the market price. Well, 1 liter is 1,800 gold coins. Long N. When did this silver dragon girl become so mercenary? Long N shook his head and gave up the idea of tricking Kirelia and Videlpan into contributing some dragon blood. The dragon blood transformation ceremony is a classic way for dragon vein creatures to be born, and it can almost be said to be the way to give birth to the most dragon vein creatures. Just like the Knight novels, the brave knight killed the evil dragon and bathed in the dragon blood, and the knight's body became indestructible and infinite. But in fact, the violent power contained in the blood of a real dragon is a severe toxin for humans and most creatures. The blood of a red dragon will make the flesh and blood of the person who comes into contact boil. The blood of a black dragon will corrode and melt the person who touches it. And even the blood of a white dragon is enough to make the blood in one's body cool and die. Soaking in dragon blood to become a dragon vein creature and then killing people everywhere is obviously just a beautiful fantasy of the ignorant. There are only a few creatures that can survive after being soaked in dragon blood. No one will take such a big risk to complete the feat of slaying a dragon first, and then ignore the treasures in the real dragon's lair to win the negligible possibility of becoming a dragon vein creature. But for real dragons, it is much simpler. They don't need to slay dragons. They just need to put a little bit of their own blood, use healing magic to heal the wound, and then select a few unlucky followers and pour blood on their heads. Of course, only a few followers can be transformed in this way, and those who fail will die under the dragon blood. No matter how unworthy the lives of the followers are, they cannot be wasted like this. So after experimenting with countless followers, a real dragon obtained a transformation ritual that can restrain the power of dragon blood, which can give the transformed person more than half the chance of survival. The true dragon whose family died completely in the experiment proudly inserted this ritual into the dragon heritage. In the years that followed, almost all true dragons knew this ritual and continued to improve it. Until now, the mortality rate of this ritual has been reduced to less than 5%. After a long time of getting along, Kirelia and Videlpan also knew that Long N was a true dragon who lacked the dragon heritage. He only knew about this ritual after seeing a brief annotation in one of Ryan's books. Then Kirelia and Videlpan imagined in their minds that Long N had no dragon heritage when he was born, was abandoned by his parents, and grew up with difficulty, but was kind-hearted, and finally won the favor of the Platinum Dragon God, and then stood on the opposite side of his former parents. This is the detailed operation method and reference case of the dragon blood transformation ritual. Kirelia returned to the small room and dried the papyrus that had been quickly copied with a spell and handed it to Long N. Kirelia was too embarrassed to ask for compensation for this kind of thing that all true dragons, except those without dragon heritage like Long, knew. It was a friendly sponsorship. Long returned to the dragon's nest with the papyrus. Long, who spent some time learning the giant language, called Sorta directly and told it about the dragon blood transformation ceremony. The successful person will have the blood of a true dragon and gain the power of a true dragon, but there is a chance of death. What is your choice? Sorta calmed down from the excitement. After thinking for a long time, it knelt on one knee and lowered its head and said, "The Crazy Horn tribe is willing to be your sharpest claws and follow your will to tear all your enemies apart." In the past few days, Sorta saw the livestock raised in the farmland reclaimed by the goblins, the dog-headed people whose blood was awakened every day, and the tribesmen who settled down in new houses. It became more and more certain that its loyalty was correct. Summoning all the Minotaur warriors, facing the possibility of death, none of them retreated. Long N walked in front of them with a slightly shaky step, and once again confirmed that no one wanted to withdraw, and announced the start of the ceremony. The magic circle drawn in advance with a mixture of dragon blood and gem powder vibrated with a breathtaking blood red light. Sorta was the first to enter the magic circle, and the other minotaurs followed closely. Blue Ear also hurriedly avoided those thick thighs, and got into the magic circle between the minotaur's legs. Transform its blood, which Long N had promised long ago. Fuck, you transformed so many people at once, and you spent a full quarter of my blood. You have to fight for it. Unlike fragile humans, a real dragon can still move freely, even if it loses half of its blood, but it will fall into an extremely weak state, and the subsequent sequelae will be more serious. It's just that losing a quarter of blood is still a relatively safe range. Chapter 3. Please recommend. Please read. Please collect. Of course, it's better to have a monthly ticket. Chapter 28. All Out Attack. The transformation ritual vibrated out a wave of dragon blood that was as real as a physical body. This wave adhered to the bodies of the minotaurs as it passed through them, and then gradually soaked them. All the minotaurs were immersed in the transformation state, unconsciously roaring in pain, and their skin was undulating like worms wriggling. The muscles of the minotaurs swelled rapidly, and their bones grew with it, and their height suddenly increased by a large amount. Then, pop. The thick skin was directly torn apart and exploded, and it flew 4 or 5 meters away from their bodies. Nearly 100 minotaurs staged a bloody firework show. This is not right. Long N quickly took out the papyrus that recorded the operation method of the transformation ritual and compared it repeatedly. I have no problem with this. The mixing ratio of dragon blood and other materials is correct, and there is no mistake in drawing the magic circle. But won't it just grow dragon-like scales on the body surface first, grow dragon horns on the head, and then slowly grow in size? The minotaurs whose skin completely disappeared and whose muscle fibers could be seen directly were far from all normal, but fortunately their painful roars sounded full of vitality, without any signs of injury, weakness or dying. Long N could only comfort himself that it might be that his dragon blood was too potent. After a while, the minotaurs whose muscles were clearly visible began to grow a thin layer of skin again. The skin gradually thickened, and fine scales grew on the surface. Hair grew again between the cracks of the scales, quickly covering the scales. After waiting for a while, the minotaurs in the transformation ceremony gradually woke up, recalling the pain that made them wail and roar during the transformation. The brave minotaurs couldn't help but shudder. A minotaur who had not yet adapted to the sudden height of his sight felt as if he was stepping on something. He looked down and found that it was a blue dog-headed man who had also completed the transformation ritual. He quickly moved his feet away and pretended to know nothing. The transformation ritual was very successful. 93 of the 94 minotaur warriors and blue ears succeeded. Only 2 minotaurs who were too seriously injured did not survive the transformation ritual. Intuitively, the size of the minotaurs, who were originally about 2 meters and 3 meters tall, collectively increased to nearly 3 meters, which was not much different from ordinary hill giants. Sorta even jumped directly to 3 meters and 6 meters, and his bulging muscles were extremely oppressive. After testing, the minotaurs all gained explosive power far superior to before. The fine scales hidden under the hair were extremely tough, with good protection and elemental resistance. Some minotaurs also stimulated the static electricity contained in the scales during the test, which shocked the goblin responsible for the test, and made him twitch. Amazing collective evolution. It would probably take millions of years for creatures on Earth to complete this level of evolution. Long N exclaimed, "What a magical world." Looking at the transformation ritual array that had not been completely consumed, Long N thought for a moment, and threw Kino in. After the transformation, Kino's ability to control lightning was further improved, and it was very compatible with Long N's blue dragon bloodline. Based on the principle of shameful waste, Long N ordered the old fire lizard to crawl into the transformation ritual array. Speaking of it, the fire lizard's blood is most compatible with the red dragon. Long N didn't know what the result would be if it used its own blood to transform, but Long N didn't care. This guy didn't have a strong sense of existence. It would be better if he could complete the transformation. If he didn't succeed, he died. The fire lizard looked very excited and didn't look worried or afraid at all. Finally, a blue ray appeared in the fiery red scales, and the fire lizard, whose stratum corneum was almost white and aging, lay down in front of Long N respectfully. Long N noticed that there were 2 bulges of flesh on the top of its head and the back of its forelimbs, as if something was about to grow. He waved his hand to let it go, and then summoned Sorter. Sorter came to Long N and knelt on one knee, with his left arm flat on his left knee, his right fist supporting the ground, and his head lowered with great respect. After the dragon blood was transformed, they had a natural desire and enthusiasm to submit to, embrace, and be loyal to Long N. After being integrated into Long N's blood, the desire of the kobolds to be loyal to the real dragon also comes from the real dragon blood hidden in their bodies. How do you feel? Long N sat on the ground, his front paws folded in front of him, looking down at Sorter and asked, I feel stronger than ever before, my lord. Your great blood is flowing in my body, giving me endless power at all times. Very good, Long N said with satisfaction. Although he had lost a quarter of his own blood, the effect of the transformation greatly increased the strength of the Tauren clan. In the short term, it was a sure win. If the Taurens who were transformed into dragon vein creatures could continue to improve, it would be a lucrative investment. I'll give you 3 days to rest and adapt, and to make new weapons, Long N said. Then follow me to take back your valley. Sorter said in a deep voice. Yes, master. After Sorter left, Long N flew out of the nest and hovered over the territory. He saw the Taurens carving stones, processing wood, and building houses, as well as the lush potato farmland and a large area of newly reclaimed land next to the farmland. These Taurens are good at farming. They are gifted with the skills of planting and animal husbandry. The farming and breeding work of the goblins will soon be handed over to the Taurens. Under his orders, the kobolds stockpiled metal ores, which will play an important role in the near future. The territory was developing and growing stronger day by day, although the speed was still slow, but as a real dragon, Long N had plenty of time. The clans in the territory also saw Long N, who was unconcealed in the air. His strong and beautiful body and huge shadow passed over the heads of the clans, leaving behind the clans' pious praises and the strong wind. Long N enjoyed this kind of life very much. 3 days later, the last ray of the sun's morning light was swallowed up by the night, and Long N looked down at the gathered clans. Tonight they will fight against the unprepared hill giants. 92 dragon vein minotaurs carried stone axes that were a circle larger than their size. More than 700 dragon vein kobolds, kobold warriors, dragon chanters, and kobold warlocks were led by Scar, and formed 4 small squares. Kino also stood aside with more than 50 mutant goblins. This is already a considerable force. If Long N is willing, they can even break through several baronies and viscounties on the border of Boron within a dozen days. Long N was being stared at by his clansmen with fanatical eyes. He could sense their impatience, so he said, all troops, attack. Chapter 29 Night Raid. Glengo was lying in a wooden house that originally belonged to a minotaur. He was restless and couldn't fall asleep on the wooden bed, covered with animal skins. As a shaman, he attached great importance to his premonitions, which usually indicated that something unfavorable or even life-threatening would happen, but he had no idea what to do with this premonition. Minotaur? Glengo didn't think that those weak Minotaur would dare to come back. Besides, there were wargs patrolling outside the valley. They could immediately detect any danger and then howl to wake up the hill giants. Was he really just annoyed by the noise of those damn idiots? The hill giants dug holes in the stone walls of the valley. By gnawing on the corpses of Minotaur and the crops and livestock they planted, the hill giants could eat and drink enough every day. The overfed hill giants would snore loudly when they slept. Their bulging noses and huge nostrils formed a trumpet that amplified the snoring. As for Grengo, he had to fall asleep amidst the loud snoring of dozens of hill giants. What was even more painful was that, in order to hear the howling of the wargs as soon as possible, he could not use magic to quiet his ears. Outside the valley, a group of kobolds and goblins were quietly lurking under the leadership of the Minotaurs. They stopped at a distance from the valley. After several days of rotation monitoring by Kurelia and Videlpin, Long had figured out the patrol patterns and ranges of the wargs. The goblins, kobolds and minotaurs stopped at a safe range. 3 giant creatures, 7 or 8 meters long, spread their wings and circled in the sky, waiting for the wargs to patrol to their predetermined positions. 4 wargs, 2 in front and 2 behind, followed the path they had trampled out in the past few days on the grassland outside the valley, patrolling around the valley in circles. Evil creatures like wargs are extremely adaptable to the environment of the night. They like to lurk next to their prey in the dark, and then suddenly pounce and bite off the prey's throat. But today they are the prey. The 3 real dragons folded their wings and let themselves fall freely in a streamlined shape. Their speed was getting faster and faster, so fast that the 4 wargs had no time to react. Corelia and Videlpin, who had slightly adjusted their direction in the air, stepped on the head of a warg accurately, and the heavy pressure caused the skull of the warg to be directly shattered. Corelia and Videlpin flapped their powerful dragon wings before finally landing, using the rising force to completely offset the inertia caused by the fall, and then landed on the ground smoothly and quietly. The whole process was precise and elegant, ignoring the words of the warg whose brain was scattered all over the ground. Long N released the static electricity carried by his scales, while tearing a warg apart, electrocuting the last warg, and causing it to twitch continuously, and finally Long N killed it with a claw. A golden eagle can lock onto a rabbit at an altitude of 200 meters, then dive and accelerate to accurately kill the rabbit. As a true natural flying master, the true dragon can easily kill the rabbit with precision after diving. Not to mention that the prey is a huge creature like a warg, so it is even more impossible for them to miss. Long N rubbed the blood on the dragon's claws on the fur of the warg and said, "Go and inform Scar to catch up quickly. We have to sneak into the valley before the next group of wargs patrol here." Corelia nodded and flew towards the hiding place of the family. Videlpin, after the raid begins later, you and Corelia should suppress the hill giant shaman first. At this critical moment, Videlpin did not say much nonsense, but nodded solemnly. The battle between the ancient true dragon and the giant affected all true dragons, including metal dragons. The hatred and disgust for giants are also deeply rooted in the blood of gold and silver dragons. Although the more lawful cloud giants and storm giants have reached a reconciliation and truce agreement with the real dragons, the warlike giant races such as frost giants and fire giants usually fight to the death once they collide with the real dragons, including the barbaric and mentally retarded hill giants. Moreover, the hill giants are evil by nature, and they often attack and plunder the homes of other intelligent creatures. With a natural tendency to hate and fighting against evil, Corelia and Videlpin not only have no psychological pressure to sneak attack and slaughter these hill giants, but are even full of excitement. Long promised to sell the materials taken from the hill giants into gold coins, and give them half. Under the full command of Scar, the clansmen lined up and sneaked into the valley. After they passed through the narrow valley, the road became wider and wider. According to the Minotaur, there was a large open area in the middle of the valley, which was also the place where their tribe once settled. They didn't have time to take away their crops and livestock, and those hill giants would probably stay there. The Minotaurs sneaked along the way, seeing the Minotaurs' bodies that were eaten to pieces and left to rot in the wilderness, and the Minotaurs' bones that were eaten clean and only blood was left. Their eyes were filled with violent blood and their breathing became heavier. But they still followed Long's orders and the command of the dog-headed man Scar, quietly moving towards their old place. Suddenly, an evil illusory eyeball suddenly appeared, and the pupils moved not far in front of them, staring at the sneaking clansman. Damn it. Grengo jumped up from the bed, put on the animal skin robe, and waved his staff to cast a spell, making its voice loud and loud. Damn idiots. Get up, take up your weapons and smash the enemy. The moment they were discovered, the clansmen moved at full speed under Scar's command. The Minotaurs strode to their former tribe, roared violently, and rushed towards the enemy with huge stone axes in their hands. Sorta grabbed the neck of a hill giant who had just hurried out of the cave, and was shorter than him, and threw it to the ground. Sorta's eyes flashed with rage, and he raised the stone axe in his hand, and with the wooden stick that the hill giant was frantically resisting, he directly split the fallen hill giant into two. The price was that the stone axe in his hand could not withstand its terrifying power, and was broken into pieces, and could no longer be used. Moo. With a roar of venting, Sorta raised his foot, and stomped the hill giant's head into the mud. All the hill giants came out of the cave, and then they were shocked to find that the Minotaurs in front of them had grown to be almost as tall as them in just a dozen days. They no longer had an advantage in size and strength, and what was more terrifying was that the Minotaurs were more numerous than them, and behind the Minotaurs stood a dense group of short creatures. They brought helpers. Minotaur and kobolds. And goblins? Grengo's eyebrows were twisted together. He couldn't understand how these three creatures could unite together. He vaguely felt that something was wrong. These kobolds and the suddenly powerful Minotaur made him feel uneasy, but the battle was urgent, and he didn't have time to think too much. He raised the staff in his hand and began to chant. Then, a cone of flames and a breath of extremely cold air came straight to his position. The editor said that only 2 updates a day will be used during the new book period. As a new author, I'd better update twice a day first, haha. Thanks to several big guys for their recommendation tickets, monthly tickets and rewards. I can see them in the background. Thank you very much. Keep rolling around for votes and follow up reading. Chapter 30 I got you. It's dragon breath. Damn it. Why is there a real dragon nearby? Grengo's mutated body makes it much smarter than the average hill giant, but at the same time, it also makes its physique much weaker than a normal hill giant. If it is hit by the dragon's breath, there is no doubt that it will die. Grengo rolled over skillfully and knocked open a newly constructed illusory door. Chaos Anywhere door teleports the caster to a random location within 300 meters, which may be in the air or underground. This spell is full of uncertainty. Its only advantage is that it can be cast instantly. Grengo, who entered the door, suddenly appeared in the air about 10 meters high 30 meters away. It began to fall while still rolling on the ground. Grengo, who had been mentally prepared, instantly released the featherfall spell while falling. After his body became light and slowed down his falling speed, he released the flying spell, elemental resistance and mana shield on himself. Corellia and Videlpin, who were flying over the valley with dragon breath, turned back and aimed all the spells they could cast instantly at Grengo's position, and launched a spell washing. Grengo's mana shield can completely resist spells below the 5th ring. Corellia and Videlpin cast 2nd and 3rd ring spells, but the power of the spells cast by the real dragon is 20% to 30%, or even 40% to 50% higher than normal. Grengo didn't dare to resist this wave of spell rain, so he could only rush into the illusory door next to him again. Fortunately, it appeared more than 100 meters away this time, and the 2 real dragons were flying away from this position, getting farther and farther away from it. Not far from it was the place where the Minotaurs and hill giants were fighting. Seeing the hill giants retreating step by step under the siege of the Minotaurs' stone axes and the spells of the kobolds and goblins, Grengo could only start chanting spells. While it was chanting, it suddenly saw a kobold with mottled scales and a skull-like red scale on his face looking at it, and then the kobold waved his left hand and faded away. Scar's invisibility spell had no effect on Grengo, but as it waved its left hand, the noisy, distracting and difficult to focus dragon song immediately sounded, targeting Grengo who was chanting. Glengo's chanting was almost interrupted, but it still endured the interference of the dragon chanters, and completed the spell. All the hill giants had a layer of rock skin on their bodies. Their movements became slower, their flexibility was greatly reduced, but their defense became very strong. The Minotaur's stone axes chopped on the stone skin, but could only make a small crack, causing some flesh and blood injuries to the hill giants under the stone skin. More often, their own stone axes would break, and the stone skin that was chopped open would heal quickly. Grengo covered his head, which was confused by the interference of the dragon chanter when he was casting the spell, and raised his staff to release the huge mud spell that came with the staff. The legs and feet of the Minotaurs were stuck in the mud, but the hill giants were able to move freely in the mud, and even moved a little faster. Hill giants are favored by the earth, and most earth spells are usually beneficial to them. The Minotaurs, whose speed was slowed down by the mud spell, no longer had much advantage in flexibility and speed, but the hill giants, who were covered with stone skin and had greatly reduced mobility, still found it difficult to cause damage to the Minotaurs, and the two were in a stalemate. To maintain the situation on the battlefield between his tribe and the Minotaurs, kobolds and goblins, Grengo looked coldly at the golden dragon and silver dragon flying towards him again. It calmly calculated the distance and time for the 2 real dragons to fly to its head, chanting a spell, and a faintly visible mirror surface appeared in front of it. Grengo didn't stop. It seemed to have given up on escaping and stood there, chanting a spell again. Kirelia and Vidalpan blew dragon breath at Grengo, but it was blocked by a lens in front of it, and then immediately rebounded towards Kirelia and Vidalpan, who were spitting dragon breath. Spell reversal. The dragon breath of a real dragon is essentially a natural and instinctive spell, and spell reversal is also effective. Kirelia and Vidalpan felt for the first time what it felt like to be hit by the dragon breath of a friend. In panic, Kirelia and Vidalpan felt their bodies become extremely heavy, as if the earth was embracing them. Its gravity chains. Huge illusory chains appeared on their dragon wings and torsos, connecting to the ground. The two dragons recognized this spell from the dragon heritage, but they were still young dragons, and had no way to deal with it, so they could only fall straight to the ground. A cruel smile appeared on Glengo's face. The war between the real dragons and the giants has continued since ancient times. How could they not have means to target the real dragons? Boom. Two dull noises attracted the attention of the minotaurs and the hill giants. The two elegant and strong real dragons fell heavily on the ground, and blood oozed from their scales. Humph. Glengo sneered. If it were an adult golden dragon or silver dragon, it would definitely turn around and run away, but if it were just two young dragons, it would definitely not miss the opportunity to kill the dragons. And they were the most noble golden and silver dragons among the metal dragons. With the heads of these two real dragons, it can return to the tribe with a clear conscience. Glengo could already imagine the scene of him presenting the heads of these two real dragons to the great shaman, and after receiving the great shaman's praise, those guys who had excluded and expelled him in the past bowed their heads in front of him. All of you, attack these two dragons. The hill giants listened to Glengo's order, and rushed towards Kirelia and Vidalpan excitedly. The minotaurs tried to stop the pursuit, but found that the swamp began to harden and trapped them, and vines grew out of the swamp and entangled them. Kirelia and Vidalpan stood up with great effort despite the pressure that was pressing them to the ground, and used spells and breath to attack the hill giants who wanted to approach them, but with little effect. The stone skin on the hill giants blocked too much damage for them. Fortunately, the frost and high temperature in the breath of the two dragons were still effective. The hill giant next to Kirelia was covered with frost all over, and its movements were slow enough to be easily avoided. The hill giant next to Vidalpan rolled on the ground and howled, and the high temperature heated stone skin baked the protected hill giant like an oven. With the help of the kobolds and goblins, the minotaurs broke free and strode after the hill giants. Grengo did not expect these stupid fellows to kill the two real dragons. He just wanted to use them to delay time. With his body hidden behind a stone wall, Glengo mobilized all his mental strength, and the syllables he spoke were low and rhythmic. Suddenly, he was startled by a strong sense of crisis, and when his life was in danger, the speed of his chanting and the gestures of casting spells were almost the limit of his lifetime. A solid lightning bolt instantly pierced through his mana shield before he finished chanting, penetrated his right chest, and nailed it heavily to the ground. In the air behind him, the dragon wings flapped and hovered, and Longen, who maintained the action of throwing a spear, grinned and said, "I got you. I have to go to practice driving again. I hope I won't be scolded by the coach today. Please vote and read on." If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 31, Shameless. After Glengo suffered the backlash of being interrupted when casting the 7th ring spell and the thunder piercing his chest, his mind and body collapsed. Long carried the half-dead Glengo and flew towards the hill giants besieging Kirelia and Vidalpan. There was no need to say anything. Long only needed to attract the attention of all the hill giants and shake the hill giant shaman in his claws a few times to let the remaining hill giants understand their situation. The next battle was no suspense, and it became a unilateral pursuit and slaughter of the remaining hill giants by Long and his clan. Watching the last hill giant who escaped being chopped down by the flying axe thrown by Sorter, and then being caught up and killed by other minotaurs, Long turned his head and looked at Kirelia and Vidalpan, who were chasing after him. "You're too slow." Vidalpan, whose dragon scales were still oozing blood, complained to Long with a grin. Sorry. Longen looked at the two wounded dragon girls and felt a little guilty. After all, if you ignore their true dragon nature, they are just underage girls. It took a little longer to deal with those fleeing wargs. After all, these two are not his own clan. If he wants to cooperate happily in the future, Longen still has to take care of their emotions. He immediately decided to give them an extra 10% of the proceeds from the sale of materials on the hill giants. With Longen's promise, the two dragon girls forgot the pain in their bodies for a while. Gold coins are the best medicine for real dragons. Anyway, they are just skin injuries, and they will be fine after a good sleep. Longen ordered to count the casualties. In this battle, 2 minotaurs were killed, 6 were seriously injured, and 47 were slightly injured. 11 kobolds were killed, 34 were seriously injured, and 68 were slightly injured. Only one unlucky goblin was trampled and broke his hand bones during the pursuit, which was barely considered a serious injury. And their record was that all 58 hill giants were killed and a hill giant shaman was captured. Long and his followers won a great victory. He ordered his followers to transport the wounded and the dead back to the dragon's nest for recuperation or burial, and asked a group of followers to peel off the skin of the hill giants and dig out the eyeballs and teeth of the hill giants. These are materials that are relatively easy to preserve. After the hill giants are transported back to be made into barbecue or smoked jerky by the followers, their skulls and hand bones will also be collected. These hill giants are estimated to generate more than 5,000 gold coins. Even if they have to be divided among Corellia and Videlpin, Long can get more than 2,000. More importantly, Long has pulled out the mine next to the dragon's nest that will inevitably explode in advance, and he can develop with peace of mind again. Leaving his followers to clean up the battlefield, Long, Corellia and Videlpin returned to the dragon's nest first and flew into his own nest alone. He threw the motionless hill giant shaman on the ground and said, "Stop pretending. Open your eyes and answer my questions. I'll give you a chance to live." Grengo hesitated for a moment, but still opened his eyes and climbed up. Its staff, robes, storage rings, and everything containing the brilliance of magic were stripped off by Longen's followers. These things were not materials obtained from the hill giants, so they did not need to be shared with the two dragon girls. Longen took them all for himself. Grengo had given up resistance when he found out that the other side had 3 real dragons, and that he had lost all his magic equipment. Long looked down at this unique hill giant and said, "What's your name? Where did you come from? And do all hill giant shamans look like you?" The third question made Grengo feel humiliated. He thought that the real dragon with the dragon heritage was deliberately humiliating his deformed body, but he still answered honestly, "My lord, my name is Grengo, Grengo High Hill. We are from the High Hill tribe living on the Thunder Highlands in the northernmost part of the Storm Mountains." Grengo looked embarrassed and said, "I was born deformed. Other shamans are of normal size, and usually stronger than ordinary tribesmen." Long asked curiously, because he saw that Grengo's size was too different from that of a normal hill giant. He didn't expect that a hill giant shaman would be stronger and taller than an ordinary hill giant. He always thought that magic professions were all small and fragile like Grengo. He didn't know if there were any human mages who could use a long-range hand to rub the sun and fire, and a close-range staff to knock off the head, such as old man Gandalf. Recovering his scattered thoughts, Longen asked again, "Why did you come here? How strong is your tribe?" After being asked this question, Glengo, whose deformed body was silent for a few seconds, betrayed his tribe without hesitation. "The development of our tribe has reached its limit, but the great shaman believes that it is not the time to go to war with the human kingdom. The reproduction in the tribe is unrestrained, and the number of tribe members is increasing. The great shaman and the leader ordered the excess young and strong tribe members to go to more remote places to establish new tribes. That's why we are here." Just as Longen thought, there is an extremely powerful hill giant tribe in the north, which is why the excess population is driven out. Continue. Yes. Glengo was very cooperative and respectful. The Geokiu tribe has more than 40,000 people. There are many hill giants of 4 or 5 meters, and there are thousands of hill giants of 7 or 8 meters. The leader of the tribe is 16 meters tall and has legendary strength. In addition, the great shaman is also a legendary spellcaster. It is said that he existed before the current leader was born. No one knows his true strength now. To legends, one of which is a legendary spellcaster. Long N narrowed his eyes. No wonder, according to what Glengo said, the Geokyu tribe has the intention to attack the human kingdom. They really have the strength to do so. Usually a kingdom can only worship one legendary wizard, and it is not necessarily able to worship him. There are too many wolves and too little meat. Legendary spellcasters, the top human combat power, are too scarce. This Geokyu tribe is equivalent to having 40,000 extraordinary warriors who are far superior to humans. To legends, it is impossible to break an empire, and it is also difficult to break a kingdom, but if it is just to attack a principality, it will be easy. Long N felt a bit like a thorn in his throat facing such a powerful potential enemy, but fortunately the Geokyu tribe was at the northernmost part of the Storm Mountains, while he was located in the south-central part of the Storm Mountains. Apart from the small groups of troops that they drove out from time to time, it would not be easy for them to run into Long N. Long N breathed a sigh of relief in his heart, looked at Glengo, and smiled playfully. Your cooperation is a little beyond my expectation. I mean, you surrendered so easily to the giant's mortal enemy, a real dragon? Glengo lowered his head a few points. My lord, I'm 63 years old, and have understood a lot of things. For example, only those who can see the situation clearly are more likely to survive. You are a smart man. Long N smiled, and then his smile was a little cold, but I don't see any conscience, responsibility, and loyalty in you. In the face of life, all of these are possible, my respected master. Long N really laughed this time. You are so shameless. Glengo knew that his life was saved, so he laughed and said, thank you for your compliment. I type in the morning, practice driving in the afternoon, and come back to type at night. My eyelids are fighting. I'm begging for votes, reading and investment. Now I can get a lot of coins by investing. If I get 100 to invest in this book, it can also get a little exposure. Thank you very much. Chapter 32 What happened while sleeping? Long N, who had lost too much blood, felt a little hungry and drowsy. This was a normal reaction of the body's self-protection. He needed to eat and sleep to regenerate blood. But it was not time to sleep yet. Long N looked at Glengo, who was bowing his head respectfully. This ill giant shaman was a high-level spellcaster. Whether he wanted to escape or cause damage, it would give Long N a headache. He had to solve this problem before he could sleep peacefully. Fortunately, this world has notaries who can be said to be absolutely fair and almost absolutely capable of dealing with defaulters. Swearing an oath, or signing a contract with God, is the most powerful bondage. The young blue dragon captured a hill giant shaman who was a high-level spellcaster. If Long N prayed to Shyamut, the queen of the 5 colored dragons, and asked him to witness the signing of the contract, he might even get his favor. But Long N felt vaguely uneasy in his heart. He had a feeling that it would be better not to establish contact with the mother of the evil dragon. Long N still had Bahamut's commendation on his neck. If Shyamut saw it, she would be extremely unhappy, and would probably crush his unworthy descendants to death on the spot. Long N completely gave up the idea of praying to Shyamut. Bahamut? He is the god of good dragons, the dragon of supreme goodness. His priesthood meant that he would not accept witnesses of contracts with terms that were too harsh and unfair. Whose witness should I seek? Long N was undecided for a moment. Seeking help from the gods would naturally establish some connections with the gods in reverse. Generally speaking, the gods would not care about mortals, but the gods who were too chaotic and evil were an exception. No one could guess what they were thinking. It was common for people who had contact with them to be inexplicably corrupted, degenerated, mutated, and died. Long N finally chose the god of nature, Abehe. This god who strictly abided by the changes of the natural cycle was absolutely neutral and impartial to anything in nature. He was a good witness of the contract. Faced with the slave contract drawn up by Long N, Glengo was not dissatisfied at all, but signed his name at the end of the contract respectfully like a real servant. Glengo was very clear about his situation. He knew that he had no other choice, and he just wanted to survive. After the contract was signed, Long N felt the vicissitudes of karma's cast here, sweeping across their bodies. This sight seemed to pause for a moment on the silver scales on Long N's neck, and then immediately returned to calm and disappeared. When attracting the attention of the gods, the scales given by the platinum dragon god will indeed be noticed by other gods. Long N was glad that he did not choose a god who was hostile to Bahamut, otherwise he would not know where to cry if he was tricked by the gods. After summoning all the leaders of the family to the dragon's nest and instructing each of them on the direction of development, Long N let everyone leave. Then Long N personally went to find Kirelia and Videlpin to ask them to help take care of the territory, keep an eye on Grengo, and don't let any trouble happen in the territory. After doing all this, Long N used the magic dragon hand to hold the staff confiscated from Glengo and waved it. A stone wall immediately grew out of the entrance of the dragon's nest to block the cave. In the darkness, Long N changed a comfortable posture and slumped on the gold coins and gems. The cool scales and gems made Long N's mind relax and slowly fell into a deep sleep. The deep breathing of the real dragon echoed in the empty cave. Long N was ready to take a short nap. He just wanted to recover his body from excessive blood loss, so he ate 2 long-haired cows and stuffed a handful of gems into his mouth before falling asleep. But after it fell asleep, its neck radiated colorful light, and the silver-white scales, that were not particularly special, began to extract energy from the surrounding environment at an accelerated speed. The gems and Long N's body and the magic crystals he placed in a conspicuous position began to dissipate from the surface at an imperceptible slow speed under the effect of the silver-white scales. The golden color on the moon faded completely, the golden month ended, and the autumn moon came. Following Long N's orders, the living areas of the Minotaurs and Goblins were replanned and adjusted, and a road paved with gravel produced by the Minos was built between the living areas. The livestock breeding work in the territory was taken over by the Minotaurs, while the farmland was still managed by the Goblins, and the Minotaurs assisted in management. The newly built barns of the Minotaurs were more solid and much larger in area. Various wild animal cubs were already being raised in them, and many species that the goblins could not feed were also thriving under the care of the Minotaurs. The Minotaurs originally raised many livestock in the valley. They were very good at dealing with those livestock. Under their management, the livestock they raised grew faster and stronger. At the suggestion of the Minotaurs, Ryan also allowed them to open up a large open space around the territory to plant the grass they had planted around the valley of the original tribe. The autumn moon was gradually approaching the end of the month. In the Storm Mountains, the leaves of a small number of deciduous trees mixed with evergreen trees began to turn red and yellow, announcing that autumn was beginning to come to an end. Kirelia, Videlpin, and Ryan, brothers and sisters, who had transformed into human forms, stood together and looked at the dragon's nest closed by the stone wall. "This guy has been sleeping for a month. Don't wake him up," Videlpin complained. He left the things to them and went to sleep soundly. He said he was only sleeping for 10 days, but he hasn't woken up yet, and it seems that he won't wake up in a short time. If the energy gathered near Long's dragon's nest had not dissipated, Long's breathing could be clearly heard even through the stone wall at the entrance of the cave. They would even doubt whether Long died in the dragon's nest. Let him continue to sleep. Everything in the territory is still developing in an orderly manner. It doesn't matter whether he wakes up or not, Kirelia said. After arranging the affairs in the territory, they had nothing to do. Long promised them that their remuneration would be settled on an annual basis. If they did nothing, it would be like taking money for nothing. They were happy to be idle. The autumn month soon ended, and the harvest month arrived. In the northern part of the Onia continent, in those areas with distinct 4 seasons, this was the last month before the arrival of winter ice and snow. All mature crops had to be harvested and stored. The wild yams planted by the goblins had also been harvested. Under the guidance of the Minotaurs, Long and his team had already cut and separated the good yams they bought and planted them in the replowed farmland. The temperature in the central and southern parts of Onia is suitable all year round, and many crops can be harvested 3 times a year. In the Principality of Balan, not far from the Storm Mountains, in the Botilan Plains where the capital is located, farmers and slaves are also sowing the last white wheat of the year. And just at the border of the kingdom further east of the Botilan Plains, a fight broke out without warning, and countless spellcasters, warriors, and civilians were involved in a highly intense raid. The Principality of Balan has always been on guard against the Kingdom of Facity on the northeastern border, but it did not expect that the Principality of Leamington in the east would suddenly declare war on Balan when the last batch of grain was shipped to the northeastern border. Relying on the high fortress of the border wall, the Balan defenders finally succeeded in keeping Leamington's soldiers out of the country. As soon as the bad news from Leamington in the east reached the Grand Duke's castle in the capital of Balan, the Kingdom of Facity suddenly sent troops and officially declared war on Balan. The war came unexpectedly. Chapter 33, Rapid Growth. The Principality of Leamington and the Kingdom of Facity have simultaneously declared war on Balan. Ryan slammed his hands on his self-made desk and stood up suddenly. The papyrus with a lot of calculation formulas for the structure of fourth ring spells was stained black by the overturned ink bottle. A few curly velvet beards grew on both sides of his cheeks and his upper lip and chin. Ryan, who looked much more mature, looked at Curelia and confirmed that he had not heard wrongly. It had been more than half a month since the two countries declared war on Balan. The news was only spread to a nearby town of a viscount. Curelia happened to be wandering around the town in human form. After hearing the news, she immediately returned to tell Ryan. Ryan paced back and forth and finally stopped, saying, "This is the best chance for Lionheart. I must go back." Curelia knew that she could not persuade Ryan, so she could only give Ryan and Tina a ride in the end. She sent them to a market town next to the capital of Balan and left, not participating in the fight between humans again. The harvest month was about to end. Curelia habitually glanced at Long's dragon nest, and there was still no change. After sending Ryan and his sister away, Curelia took over Ryan's work, arranged to command all the clan leaders in the territory, and received their reports regularly. The clan leaders had heard some secrets about Long, Curelia and Vidalpin from the Kobold tribe, and they were not dissatisfied with Curelia's orders. "Where are you going again?" Curelia saw the golden dragon Vidalpin flapping its fin-like dragon wings like waves not far away, standing in front of the nest and ready to take off. Vidalpin turned his head to look at his friend and laughed. "Of course, to enforce justice. It means to become a weak human, then wait for the Avaldoa to approach, and finally beat the Avaldoa, tie him up, and throw him into the noble mansion or the court of the Church of Light. What is the enforcement of justice? It is clearly fishing enforcement. This is one of the most favorite leisure activities of the Golden Dragon. In the past month, the public security of various cities in the western province of the Principality of Balan, which is close to the Storm Mountains, has improved to varying degrees. It is rumored that a ranger is fighting against those evil people who bully the weak. Many well-known thieves, robbers, and villains have been hanged on the execution ground. This has forced many Avaldoas to choose to stay quiet for a while, fearing that they will be the next to be hung on the gallows. This guy said that he was not good at handling territory construction matters and could not help. He had to leave it all to himself. It was really hateful. Curelia thought with some envy. Suddenly, an unusual energy fluctuation came from Long's dragon nest, causing Curelia and Vidalpin, who was about to take off, to turn their eyes. Then, they heard a real dragon's wail that spread throughout the territory. "My gem." Long lowered his body in grief and climbed out of the dragon's nest. However, the crown-shaped dragon horn accidentally scraped off a pile of rocks on the top of the cave, and Long could only lower his head even lower. Curelia and Vidalpin, who had already flown to Long's lair and were waiting, looked in astonishment at a huge beast with its body lowered as it crawled out of the cave. Blue scales, dark crown dragon horns. It was Long, that's right. But, why was it so big? Question mark? Long in front of him was 13 meters long. After sleeping for more than 2 months, he actually grew 5 meters. After crawling out of the cramped cave, Long's neck was finally able to relax and straighten. Moving his neck, Long looked down at Curelia and Vidalpin. "Why are you looking at me like that? How did you suddenly grow so big? You've grown into a large dragon." Vidalpin screamed after being stunned. After Long woke up, he found that his body had grown several meters, but at the same time, all the gems he had piled up had shrunk a lot, and some smaller gems became the size of rice grains, or even disappeared directly, leaving no trace of their existence. The 2 magic crystals that Long had left as decorations before were also more than half smaller. In such a strange situation, the only possibility that Long N could think of was that his body was still unconsciously absorbing the energy of these gems after he fell asleep. In this way, the shrinking gems and the skyrocketing body size all made sense. Long N first suspected the dragon scales given by the platinum dragon god. After all, this situation did not occur during his previous sleep. Facing Vidalpan's shock and confusion, Long N just wanted to laugh twice. Envy the sudden increase in body size. I exchanged it for gems. Long N loved and hated the cheating golden finger given by the good dragon god. Although he felt sorry for the gems, Long N was also excited about the improvement of his own strength. 6 to 10 meters is a medium-sized dragon, 10 to 18 meters is a large dragon, and 18 to 30 meters is a super large dragon. Long N's sleep this time directly reached the level of a large dragon, which is usually the size of a teenage dragon in his 30s or 40s. Long N, excluding the days when he ate and slept after hatching, he has been in this world for less than half a year. In terms of age, he is still just a young dragon. This is 1 year old? Who would believe it if I told others? Well, maybe it has something to do with the gift of the platinum dragon god. Corellia and Vidalpan no longer had any doubts about Long's explanation, but their mood was a little complicated. It is said that the gold dragon and the silver dragon are the most favored dragons by the common master of the metal dragon, His Majesty Bahamut, the god of good dragons. But their Majesty Bahamut seems to prefer the alien blue dragon in front of him. I learned from Corellia that the territory has developed steadily without any trouble, and because of the war in the Principality of Balan, the Ryan brothers and sisters saw the opportunity to revive the family, so they returned to the capital of Balan first. Long looked at the cave behind him, which seemed a little small for him, and directly met Blueear, Goldenfoot, Sorter, Kino and Glengo, who rushed over as soon as possible outside the cave. All the clansmen saluted Long respectfully and praised their increasingly powerful master. Glengo, who knelt on the ground, lowered his head, and there was no resentment in his heart. At the beginning, Long N attacked by surprise and outnumbered Long N, which forced it to sign a slave contract. But now, Glengo felt that, even if Long N returned all his magic equipment to him, it would be difficult for him to escape from this terrifying real dragon. Moreover, it has only been 2 months. If he is given a few more years, he may grow into a super large dragon, which is the size of an adult real dragon. Boom. A vibration suddenly came from the ground, and then a huge dragon-like dragon with a body length of 15 meters, short limbs, a pair of narrow dragon wings on its back, a bunch of barbs on the back of its neck, blue mixed with fiery red scales, and a pair of dragon horns on its head, broke out from the ground not far from the dragon's nest. It was the fire lizard dragon that had mutated after the dragon blood transformation ceremony. Originally a dragon creature, even after the ritual transformation, it did not suddenly feel too close to Long N and worship him. Instead, the sudden increase in strength made it ambitious. It grew wings and dragon horns, and it was also a real dragon. It wanted to leave here and enjoy the life of a real dragon. The fire lizard that had just rushed out of the ground was filled with ecstasy, and then, a huge blue dragon claw containing violent thunder quickly grew larger in its bulging eyes, and with a smash, it hit its head hard. The scales on its head were electrified and blackened, and the fire lizard was smashed to the ground, sliding a distance, and plowing a deep pit. Its head was dizzy, and it didn't understand what happened for a while. Before it fainted, it only heard a familiar voice saying, "Did I ask you to show off?" Chapter 34 The Other Side of the Mountains. Long N slapped the fire lizard, which was lying on the ground like a dead dog, with one claw, confirming that the guy had indeed fainted. Not much improvement, still can't withstand a single blow. Long N looked at the fire lizard with the characteristics of a real dragon, and said with some disappointment, just when he was trying to find a convenient sandbag to test how much his current strength had improved compared to before, he saw the mutated fire lizard trying to run away. The perfect sandbag was delivered to his face, and Long N couldn't help but slap it. Unexpectedly, this slap made the fire lizard faint directly. Long N, who had just regained his interest, felt uncomfortable as if his interest had stopped. Several dog-headed people crawled out of the big hole that the fire lizard had drilled out of, and immediately prostrated themselves to Long N when they saw him. Stopping the dog-headed people's harsh praise, Long N asked, "What's wrong with this guy?" The dog-headed people explained that it turned out that this fire lizard had crawled into the underground cave and slept alone after undergoing the dragon blood transformation ceremony and only woke up just now, which was almost the same time as Long N woke up. Long N recalled a special case in the dragon blood transformation ritual that Corellia copied for him. In the case, the real dragon used its own blood to transform its followers into dragon blood creatures. After that, the followers had an extraordinary blood connection with it. As the real dragon grew in size and strength, the followers connected to its blood also suddenly increased in strength. Thinking of this, Long N called Sorter, Kano, and Blueear, the 3 tribal leaders who had experienced dragon blood transformation. During the 2 months I was asleep, did you feel that your strength had improved? Long N's inquiry received a positive answer from them, and the improvement was the greatest during the period when he woke up. The size of the 3 of them had increased significantly. Long N initially thought that it was the change caused by the gradual absorption of the energy that was not completely consumed in the dragon vein transformation ritual. In this way, the followers transformed by his dragon blood this time are all special dragon vein creatures that can become stronger with his own improvement. Perhaps after several decades, as Long N gradually grows up, these followers connected with his blood will become high-ranking warriors and may even reach the legendary level. This can be considered an unexpected surprise. After calling the dog-headed man to fill up the big hole made by the fire lizard dragon, Long N flew back to the front of the dragon's nest. Where were we talking about? It took less than 3 minutes to beat up the fire lizard dragon and arrange to fill the hole. Everyone once again had a clearer understanding of Long N's strength. Especially Glengo. It had a hunch that it was very likely not the opponent of the red dragon, and the dragon did not last more than 2 seconds under Long N's hands. This was partly because the fire lizard dragon had just emerged from the ground and had not reacted, but it was also because of this that it further explained how fast Ryan Slap was. Everyone even felt that Long N flew in front of the fire lizard dragon in a flash of lightning. This was obviously not the speed that a normal blue dragon should have. You just mentioned the popularization of the common language of the followers and the expansion of the territory, Master. Glengo reminded. Long N continued to talk about the topic he had not finished, and then let them go about their own business. After instructing the kobolds who were good at mining and digging holes to expand their nest, Long N decided to go out for a walk. It was inevitable that it would be boring to just give orders, and he had no place to study books and spells in peace before the dragon's nest was expanded. After sleeping for such a long time, it would be a good choice to fly around to stretch his muscles and catch some prey to fill his stomach. Because of the efficient hunting activities of the goblin hunting team around the territory, the prey has become less and less, and Long N decided to fly farther to sea. Undaunted by his more powerful dragon power, Long N flew over the forest, and the strong wind he brought shook the treetops and made them shake. Common prey such as white-backed deer and deadleaf gazelles lay low in fear and dared not move. Flying over these prey, Long N had the illusion of selecting slaughtered and cut pieces of meat in front of the supermarket's fresh keeping cabinet. Without the fun of hunting, Long N lost his appetite for a while. How about going to the other side of the Storm Mountains? Long N had been flying over this long and lush forest, and he suddenly wanted to go to the other side of the Storm Mountains to see the legendary Storm Sea, which is always covered by storms. Long N returned to the dragon's nest, and after telling Corellia, who was still in the dragon's nest, that he might not come back for a few days, he headed straight for the Storm Mountains, which is known as the Spine of Onia. The east side of the Storm Mountains is mostly difficult to cross cliffs, so few other creatures set foot there. The closer Long N flew to the ridge, the higher the flight altitude he had to rise, and the air was cooling rapidly. The long broad-leaved forests disappeared, and at this altitude, the only vegetation growing on the mountains was large tracts of black pine. In some relatively flat pine forests, huge elks with thick fur could be vaguely seen, and Long N also saw a snow leopard preying on a grey goat on a cliff. Finally, the snow leopard bit a grey goat by the neck and fell down a cliff more than 10 meters high. Just as it was about to bite the goat's throat completely, Long N, who was watching the battle, killed both of them with one breath. The temperature is low on the mountain, and the prey has more fat to keep warm, so the taste is a little fatter. After commenting on the difference in taste from the prey at the foot of the mountain, Long N continued his journey. The black pine forest gradually disappeared, and the snow on the mountain became more and more. Only a few low cold resistant plants grew in the cracks between the rocks. There is no prey here, and few large animals can survive in such a resource scarce environment. The flight altitude continued to rise, and only the white snow peaks were visible. The extreme cold of -40 degrees and the thin oxygen did not have much impact on Long N. The powerful body of the real dragon can withstand various extreme environments that most species cannot survive. Beyond the towering snow peaks, there is a snowfield that stretches as far as the eye can see. Is this the back of Onya? Unexpectedly, it's full of life. This low-lying snowfield seems to be affected by the monsoon of the storm sea on the west side. The temperature is much higher than that of the peak on the east side, probably only about -10 degrees. On the thick snow layer, the large straight and tall fir trees have grown to this size over many years. Under the fir forest, there are a large number of small animals that rely on the fir trees for survival, as well as predators such as plateau wolves and snow badgers that feed on them. This is an ecosystem completely different from the foot of the mountain. Long N did not stay for long, flying over this snowfield and heading further west. I don't know how long I flew until the sun passed over Long N's head and fell to the west. The unchanging white finally faded, and a sea horizon reflecting golden light appeared in the sky. Long N flapped his wings faster, and the sea horizon became wider in his eyes, and he saw the storm sea. Chapter 35 The Unlucky Dwarf. There are no pure white beaches, nor coconut trees. Long N flew to the coast, and all he could see were black reefs of strange shapes. Landing on a reef, Long N looked around. There were no creatures living near the coast, except for crabs and snails hiding in the cracks of the reefs. It was a wasteland. The weather was clear at the moment, and the setting sun was reflected on the dark blue sea, but the wind was still strong. Waves of waves kept hitting the hard reefs, and broke into a ball of foam. The huge roar of the waves echoed in Long N's ears, and he muttered to himself, no wonder the west side of the Storm Mountains is rarely mentioned in various travel notes, maps, and illustrations. This is really not a place that ordinary people can reach. Either climb over the towering Storm Mountains, or take a boat through the surging Storm Sea, just to come to this place where no one lives. That must be because you are bored. Huh. Long N, who was bored, raised his neck and looked into the distance. A small black dot was floating in the sunset reflected on the distant horizon. Something on the sea. Long decided to go and see what it was. Mast. Connect the mast. Oh my forge. Some people go and plug the hole in the bottom of the boat. This guy's leaking. Sailman. Where is the sailman? Captain. The sailman fell into the sea. Moradin. Fuck his goblin ass. Bang. Copperhammer picked up an empty oak barrel and smashed it hard at his drunk companion on the deck. I should throw you, a bastard, directly into the storm sea to feed the mako sharks. Copperhammer's reddish-brown curly beard stood up in anger. If he couldn't find a navigator, how could he let Gordon, an old drunkard, get on his ship? Fortunately, they had survived the terrible storm. At least most of them had survived. Uncle, the hole in the bottom of the boat can't be plugged. Water is still pouring into the cabin. Call me captain. Copperhammer slapped his nephew, who was over 120 years old and still ignorant, on the back of his head. There's land ahead. Row the boats. Let them row. It's northwest wind now. Urshu. Raise all the sails that can still be used. Let this poor fellow reach the shore. Damn it. Go. Tangchu was so angry that his blood rushed up, and his brown skin turned the same reddish brown as his beard. He kicked the drunken old Gordon on the ground hard, and the latter was still snoring loudly. He was so drunk that he didn't fall into the sea in that storm. This damn guy was really lucky. 2 rows of oars stretched out on both sides of the tattered hull, and the young men who were still alive in the cabin shouted and rowed the oars. Tangchu looked in the direction of the land. Thanks to the damn wind, they should be able to reach the shore before the boat sank. Click. A slippery tentacle as thick as a bucket rested on the edge of the boat, making a suction cup sucking sound. Tangchu was attracted by the sound, and turned his head away, and his heart suddenly sank. Moradin. Why am I so unlucky? Hooah 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 hooah. The sound of breaking water came from all directions, and dozens of tentacles rushed out of the sea from all sides of the ship, also buckling the suction cups on the edge of the ship. Copperhammer and everyone on the deck attacked the tentacles with all their strength, but it still could not change the fact that the ship was slowly tilting under the power of the tentacles. Seeing that everyone on the ship was about to die in the mouth of the sea monster, Copperhammer suddenly envied the bastard old Gordon. At least he died in a dream while drunk. What is that? Suddenly, a crew member noticed a black spot in the sky that was pulling in at a high speed and shouted to attract the attention of all the people waiting to die. It's a dragon. Copperhammer instantly felt that he was alive again. Hey, this way, Moradin, Moradin. Ha 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 ha. Longen looked at the group of little guys standing on the tilted deck and cheering for him and couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. They are generally 1.3 meters tall, with a sturdy build, brown or tan skin, a signature beard, a horned helmet on their heads, and iron axes and hammers in their hands. Dwarves. Why did they get here? As far as Longen knew, there was only one dwarf kingdom on the continent of Onia, and it was at the southernmost tip of the continent. Don't just stand there. Big guy. Help us. Get rid of that guy down there. Longen glanced at the dwarf with a reddish brown beard and shouting loudly, and felt helpless. What language is this? He just wished he could make Ryan into a translator and carry it with him. Regardless of this, Longen folded his dragon wings and plunged into the water. As soon as he entered the water, a sense of comfort and excitement engraved in his genes instantly surged into Longen's heart, just like a fish returning to the water. He stretched out the membrane flippers that he usually folded between his fingers and swam easily in the water. According to records, blue dragons are usually seen in deserts, but they can also be found on plateaus and coastal islands. Moreover, blue dragons living in clans are usually more likely to live on the coast or on islands. Only the ocean with rich resources can provide enough food for the blue dragons of an entire clan. So it is not surprising that blue dragons have webbed feet and are good at moving in the water. Under the dark blue sea, the light is even dimmer, but Longen, with his powerful vision, can still see the sea monster under the ship through a layer of diaphragm that protects the eyeballs in the sea water. It is a giant octopus, with tentacles that must be at least 30 meters long, otherwise it would be impossible to attack such a 60-meter long 3-masted sailing ship. Seeing Longen approaching, the octopus sea monster waved its tentacles threateningly, but seeing that it was useless, several tentacles rushed towards Longen, trying to wrap around Longen's wings and limbs. Longen's wings flapped flexibly, and the propulsion from the water made him change direction quickly. Several tentacles missed and turned to Longen, but Longen easily dodged them. The octopus monster is much smarter than ordinary sea beasts, but that's all. It is still just a sea monster, not an intelligent creature. It's a good time to try your hand. Longen suddenly stopped dodging, and with one claw, he directly grabbed the tentacle that was waving at him, and directly broke 2/3 of the tentacle that was as thick as a bucket, leaving only a piece of meat barely connected. Feeling the pleasure of the tough muscle fibers between his claws being broken into pieces, Longen was very satisfied, both with his own strength and the sharpness of his claws. The octopus monster was furious because one of its tentacles was almost broken, and it gave up its toys on the sea and attacked Longen with all its strength. Longen figured out the upper limit of the octopus monster and rushed directly between the tentacles, fighting it head on with the strength of his body. Huge waves surged on the sea, and the tattered 3-masted sailboat swayed up and down in the waves. The dwarves on the deck grabbed everything they could grab around them, and their calves trembled wildly. The hole that no one had blocked allowed more seawater to flow in, and the sailboat's water line was rising little by little. Moradin. Are you kidding me? First there was the drunk navigator, then there was the damn storm, and now there's the disgusting sea monster. Do I have to sink into the sea? Tancha hugged the mast, tied himself to the mast with a rope around his waist, dragged the drunk navigator's stinky feet in his hand, and cursed to the sky with resentment on his face. Please vote, please vote. Chapter 36, Free Employees. The octopus monster gradually began to fear. Each of its tentacles was scarred, but the enemy was still intact and powerful. Seeing that the octopus monster wanted to run away, Long N was tired of playing, so he bit a tentacle and cut it off with his claws, letting the octopus monster escape in panic, spitting ink. The waves on the sea surface gradually slowed down, and the dwarves on the three-masted sailing ship finally breathed a sigh of relief. Suddenly, a water bag rose on the sea surface, dyed dark black by ink, and the blue real dragon rushed out of the water with the constantly twisting tentacles of the sea monster in its mouth. The surging waves made the sailing ship shake. Long N used his claws to hold the twisting tentacles, and stimulated the electrical energy contained in his body to shock the tentacles, and make them twitch for a while. Finally, the half-cooked tentacles calmed down. Tangchu watched the real dragon lower its tentacles to the deck, and signaled them to wrap the tentacles around the bow. Tangchu immediately understood what Long N meant. He yelled at the sailors to seal the hole in the cabin and scoop out the water with buckets. He quickly untied the ropes on his body and tied his tentacles tightly around the bowsprit. Tangchu breathed a sigh of relief and collapsed on the bow with his whole body powerless. Good news, they survived after a series of bad luck. Bad news, they were saved by a real dragon. Even the believers of the pure dragon platinum dragon god, those righteous gold and silver dragons, would demand reasonable rewards from the rescued. A real dragon would never miss any of the wealth it deserved, not to mention that this was a blue dragon among the 5-color evil dragons. 5-colored dragons are always more greedy and unrestrained than metal dragons. Worst case scenario, he and others might have to serve as its followers or slaves, unless they can promise to pay enough ransom to have a chance to be allowed to leave. Long N pulled the giant octopus tentacles, and after making sure that the knot was tied very tightly, he immediately dragged the ship, which might sink to the bottom of the sea at any time, towards the shore. Long N, who was 13 meters long, dragged a 60-meter three-masted sailing ship, which seemed a bit strange, but in fact, the resistance in the water was not as great as imagined, and with the dwarves holding up the sails with the wind, Long N dragged it without any effort. He chose a sandy place without reefs to drag the boat to the shore. Long N released the giant octopus tentacles that were more than 20 meters long in his hand and smashed them on the sand with a bang. The dwarves climbed down the rope ladder lowered from the deck one after another with laughter and noise and gathered in a group to celebrate their survival. What an optimistic and cheerful race. They just experienced life-threatening situations and they can laugh so quickly as if they just went out for a drink together. After everyone got off the boat, Tangchu lifted up the old Gordon who had not woken up yet and threw him directly over the edge of the boat. Great true dragon. Thank you for helping us poor people. We will definitely pay you a satisfactory reward. Copperhammer only wanted to escape and survive, so even if the blue dragon wanted his entire ship's cargo, it would be fine. This was what he had thought about when he asked for help from the blue dragon that suddenly appeared. But the blue dragon on the opposite side did not speak immediately, but stared at him straight. Copperhammer's heart skipped a beat. This dragon would not really save them just to make them slaves, right? Long N was carefully recalling every syllable that Copperhammer said, and it seemed that he was staring at Copperhammer. It sounds similar to the Anaya common language. Long N thought to himself. After thinking about it, Long N still tried to ask in the Anaya common language, "Can you understand me, Anaya?" As soon as Long N finished asking, the dwarf with a reddish brown beard in front of him jumped up twice as high as him in shock. Bronzebeard stood there with his mouth open. Hearing the language spoken by Long, even the optimistic and cheerful mentality of the dwarves could not stand it. Ahem. Long coughed lightly, bringing the confused dwarf back to his senses. "Aren't you dwarves from the continent of Onia?" After a conversation, Long understood that this group of dwarves came from the continent of Runia, which is further north of the continent of Onia. The dwarf with a reddish brown beard in front of him was called Bronzehammer. In their country, he was a minor noble and the leader of this group of dwarves, or the captain. They were originally going to sail westward along the edge of the storm sea and transport the goods in the ship to another human country by sea. As a result, they were led off course by a drunken navigator and plunged into the depths of the storm sea. After that, they encountered terrible storms and huge waves. In the storm, that lasted for 3 days and 2 nights, they completely lost their way and were carried to the middle of the west coast of Onia by the chaotic ocean currents in the storm, and then met Long. It was precisely because of the trade relations with the countries in the north of Onia that he knew a lot of the common language of Onia. Then do as you said. The weapons, armor, and ingots transported in the ship will be my reward for saving you. Longen smiled and said, but if you want to return to your country, it may be a little difficult. After all, this is the west coast of Onia, west of the Storm Mountains. Longen turned his head and tilted his head towards the Storm Mountains behind him, which were like a high wall reaching into the clouds, and had a very oppressive feeling. This is the Storm Mountains. Tang Chu had seen a rough map of the Onia continent. The Storm Mountains extend from north to south along the west coast, all the way through the entire Onia. Mountains like the Storm Mountains are almost impossible to cross. They are now in the middle of the west coast of Onia. If they want to take a detour, they have to cross half of the Onia continent. Moreover, there are no civilized countries on the west side of the Storm Mountains. The danger and difficulty of this journey can be imagined. Since your ship is also broken, and you can't go back, why don't you visit my territory first? Longen smiled and said. Tang Chu hesitated and tangled, and hit his head with his fist, making a hollow dong dong sound. If they went to the territory of this real dragon, they would have to pay a lot of temporary accommodation fees, food fees, service fees and other miscellaneous expenses in the future if they wanted to leave. But if they didn't go, they couldn't just walk back all the way. Seeing Tang Chu hesitate, Longen raised his neck at the right time, showing the scales given by the Platinum Dragon God and said, I'm the favored one of the Platinum Dragon God. I sincerely accept your invitation. Of course, as a reward for helping you, you have to work for me in my territory for 5 years. This is a fair and equal transaction. Seeing the silver white scales on Longen's neck that deliberately released the sacred aura of the Platinum Dragon God, Tang Chu finally felt at ease. It is not impossible to forge the evidence of the gods, but the premise is that the forger must be at least a god of equal power. Since this dragon is the favored one of the Platinum Dragon God, it will at least not do anything evil. Just now, after paying a shipload of goods, the other party did not greedily continue to ask for more, which also proved this point. But what he didn't know was that Longen didn't want to ask for more, but he wanted the dwarves themselves. Dwarves are the best blacksmiths is the consensus of this world. Longen brought them back to the camp to exploit them, which would make much more money than extorting gold coins and gems. Let the clan learn their forging skills. After they work for a few years, Longen will have a group of blacksmiths of his own, which is a huge profit. 5 years is not too long for a dwarf who can live for 400 years. Copperhammer thought about it, and said boldly and sincerely, oh, my friend, I have to thank you for your help. I hope we can have a pleasant cooperation. Chapter 37 Words in Thunder. As night fell, all the dwarves evacuated the coast and came to the foot of the Storm Mountains. Storms are frequent here. For millions of years, plants have adapted to the environment here. They grow short, thick, sparse branches and small leaves. Only in this way can they avoid being blown away by hurricanes. No large animals have been seen here for the time being, but it is not certain whether there will be any extraordinary creatures that love storms and move here. For safety and comfort, the dwarves, who are as good at mining and digging caves as the kobolds, dug a cave on the spot that was large enough for more than 50 dwarves to live in, and moved all the supplies on the ship into the cave. Weapons, armor, and ingots have all been stored by Longen with his storage ring. The tattered 3-masted sailing ship was completely emptied, and the wooden boards were finally removed to serve as firewood. In the cave, the dry wood used for shipbuilding soaked in tung oil burned violently in the fire. Most of the supplies in the dwarves' cabin were soaked in water, and there was only a small amount of dry food, so they simply took out the soaked food and had a big meal. Using magic to extract clean water, the dwarves cooked the soaked bread, chopped bacon, and potatoes into a pot of thick potato and bacon porridge, which was served with grilled octopus tentacles. All the dwarves kept devouring the food. They had not eaten anything for 3 days and 2 nights in the storm, and they were already starving. After filling their stomachs a little, they opened oak barrels one by one, and poured golden wine directly into their mouths. These were all golden rums to be transported and sold. One oak barrel could be sold for 800 gold coins, but now that the ship was gone, the business naturally could not be done. The alcoholic dwarves were happy to use the surplus value of these goods for the owners. The 2 oak barrels quickly ran out of air, and the drunken dwarves laughed loudly around the campfire. When someone started the tune, all the dwarves sang and danced together in rough voices, completely forgetting the horror of the past few days. Outside the cave, Long, who was enjoying a large piece of octopus tentacles alone, suddenly fell in love with these heartless, and possibly brainless, dwarves. The fire gradually dimmed, and the extremely exhausted dwarves wrapped in dried furs and bedding fell asleep, and the whole cave was filled with snoring. Long decided to wait for the dwarves to move over. He must make sure that the dwarves live as far away from his dragon's nest as possible. The wind gradually rose, and the sky and the sea were as deep as ink. There was a faint sound of thunder from the sea in the distance. The storm was coming again. Long took out the staff seized from Glengo and used the stone wall spell to seal the cave of the dwarves so that they could sleep well in the storm. Of course, he did not forget to leave a ventilation hole for the dwarves. If all the professionals he had picked up with great difficulty died of carbon monoxide poisoning in their sleep, it would be a big loss. Boom. A huge lightning exploded near the coast, and the surroundings were as bright as day in an instant. Suddenly, the wind howled, and the whole sky was covered with water curtains. The forest of thunder and lightning continued to explode in the distant sea, and the huge waves hitting the coast roared and shook. Longen's eyes were illuminated by lightning, and the extreme pleasure hidden in his blood made him extremely eager for this extreme storm. Without much hesitation, he flapped his wings and rushed towards the dark clouds that dropped the water curtain. Longen crossed the coast, crossed the offshore, and flew into the storm. Boom. A lightning bolt as thick as a bowl struck Longen's body, and a burst of numbness with pleasure spread throughout his body. At the moment, when the lightning fell and illuminated the world, a blue dragon flew between the water curtains at a very fast speed, and then disappeared into the darkness after the light disappeared in an instant. Lightning bolts struck Longen's body, making his scales emit a blue light, as if they were charged, and countless electric snakes wandered uncontrollably on his body. Boom. Another lightning bolt. Longen, who roared happily, stopped in astonishment, flapped his wings, and stopped in the air. Use your heads to build my palace. A faint majestic laughter echoed in Longen's ears. This sentence accompanied by laughter was spoken in dragon language. Longen was sure of it. This place is not right. Longen frowned and looked at the lightning forest around him, and suddenly felt a little dark and weird. Suddenly, another lightning bolt struck Longen, and intermittent words emerged again. The Empire will not. Longen was shocked by the lightning, and immediately realized that there was something wrong with the lightning. Seeing that this abnormality did not affect him, Longen decided to continue flying towards the depths of the storm sea, and at the same time he was ready to turn around and run away at any time. Thunder and lightning still kept falling, and lightning fell on Longen from time to time. Every few lightning bolts, Longen would hear a whisper, or roar in dragon language, sometimes a complete sentence, sometimes a few scattered words or phrases. But unfortunately, Longen never heard any useful information. The storm came and went quickly. After Longen flew in thunder and rainstorms for several hours, the rain suddenly began to slow down. The thunder and lightning subsided immediately, and the heavy clouds were dispersed by the strong wind. Without the rainstorm and lightning, Longen could not hear the words transmitted by the lightning, so he had to turn around and fly back. He didn't feel anything when he was flying in the storm, but when he flew back, Longen realized that he had flown so far, probably hundreds of kilometers away from the continent of Onia. After several hours of flying, Longen vaguely guessed the era of the owner of the voice from the words transmitted by the lightning. He heard words such as True Dragon Empire, Giant, and War, and some sentences seemed to be said in battle. These were left by a powerful true dragon in the war between true dragons and giants in ancient times, and according to the way he left and transmitted the sound, the powerful true dragon was also a blue dragon. Longen knew very little about that ancient history. He only knew that the battle between the real dragon and the giant made the two become mortal enemies, and they have been fighting for several eras. After all, he did not have the dragon heritage. But in fact, those real dragons who normally possess the dragon heritage would not know that history. At most, they could know the intensity and outcome of the war, and the details of the process had long been covered up or deleted. The capacity of the dragon heritage has its upper limit. From ancient times to the present, new things have been born continuously. It is impossible to cram all of them into the heritage. Not to mention that some narcissistic real dragons will also pack their own biographies into the heritage, so that future generations can witness their glorious history. The powerful real dragons who have the ability to modify the content of the heritage can only delete some heritage content that is too old or useless. After expressing his admiration for the power of the real dragon that could leave its voice for who knows how many thousands of years, Long sighed and said, "The undead spirits wandering in the underground ruins, the remnants of the battle between the real dragon and the giant in the storm sea, how come they are all related to ancient history? What kind of things do I encounter every day?" If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 38, Being a Mercenary. Returning to the cave dug by the dwarves, Long asked them to wait for a while, and he returned to the territory to find a way to bring them back. Flying over the storm mountains again, Long returned to the territory at the fastest speed. Passing the crawling family members, Long landed in front of the expanded dragon's nest. The dragon's nest was not only expanded to a size suitable for Long to live in, but also simple patterns were carved on the stone walls inside. It can be seen that the dog-headed people were very attentive to Long's nest. As soon as he returned to the territory, before he had time to find Curelia, the shining silver-white elegant figure landed at the entrance of the dragon's nest and said, "The war in Berlin is getting intense, and the battle in the capital is in a stalemate. The Orthodox Berlin faction supported by the Lionheart family, where Ryan is located, has returned to the capital and formally confronted the New King's faction, but the situation is not optimistic. The New King's faction has control of the army. They hope to obtain additional military support. Ryan wrote to ask about your willingness. The expelled Grand Duke's son promised you very generous conditions." Letting the exquisite letter handed by Curelia float in front of him, Long glanced at the gorgeous and complex golden patterns on the letter and read the contents of the letter carefully. From the handwriting, it can be seen that it was written by Ryan. The content is almost the same as what Curelia said, but there is a paragraph of words that Ryan wrote and paraphrased at the end. The son of the Grand Duke of Berlin gave a righteous speech in the letter, showing his necessity and determination to regain the position of the Grand Duke, and finally expressed his willingness to hire Long. Interesting. Hiring real dragons is not uncommon in this world, just as dragon slaying also happens from time to time. But metal dragons either have brain circuits and various problems that are difficult for mortals to understand, or they follow their inner precepts and will not interfere in the internal affairs of other races. On the contrary, 5-colored dragons are very good candidates for employment. They have no principles and precepts that need to be adhered to. Their greed allows them to be easily driven by gold coins, and there have even been many 5-colored dragon mercenaries with clearly marked prices. To hire a 5-colored dragon, all you need to do is pay gold coins and pay more gold coins. But the problem is that 5-colored dragons have no principles and bottom line. Therefore, hiring a 5-colored dragon must at least have the ability to protect the treasure from being directly taken away by a real dragon with bad intentions, and be prepared to prevent the 5-colored dragon from being bribed and betrayed by the other party at a higher hiring price. The son of the Grand Duke must have received advice from Ren. A lawful blue dragon openly showed up to support him. This not only represents an immediate high-level military force, but also represents the future security and prosperity of the entire Principality of Berlin. After establishing a long-term and reliable cooperative relationship with the real dragon, if there is a suitable opportunity, most principalities and even kingdoms are very happy to add a real dragon that can intimidate neighbors to the royal flag and emblem. The lifespan of a real dragon can reach 2,000 years, and the older it is, the stronger it is. This can at least keep the kingdom strong and prosperous for thousands of years. If Long is reliable, all the nobles will understand the significance of the principality establishing friendship with the real dragon, and his support will be a huge political bargaining chip. Long N put away the letter paper and first communicated with Curelia about what happened on the west side of the Storm Mountains. In the communication with Curelia, the two dragons agreed that using the high-level teleportation array was the most convenient and quickest way. This is a variant of the 7-ring spell. They do not have enough ability to draw the array, but Long N happens to have a high-level spellcaster under his command. Calling Glengo, the hill giant shaman who had been extremely honest and dedicated since the signing of the contract, saluted respectfully and humbly to Long and Curelia. Long gave the task of drawing the magic circle to Glengo. Although each high-level spell requires a long period of research to master, Glengo cannot learn this spell in a short time and cannot construct the spell structure in his mind, but it can completely disassemble the magic circle structure and draw a small part at a time, which will greatly reduce the difficulty. First let Glengo draw a high-level teleportation magic circle in the territory, and then Curelia will take it to fly over the Storm Mountains to draw the second magic circle, so that the dwarves can be directly teleported to the territory. After instructing Curelia and explaining the matters about the dwarves, Long decided to fly to the capital of Boran. Why not get a lot of appearance fees for just showing up? By the way, if the faction supported by the Lionheart family wins, Long can also find Ryan to settle the balance of the money he saved their brothers and sisters. After stacking the weapons, armor, and ingots that filled the storage rings in the dragon's nest, and freeing up enough space for gold coins and treasures, Long N spread his wings and flew straight into the clouds. At night on the Batiran Plain, on the top floor of Carter Castle next to the Batiran capital, a young man in luxurious clothes supported his hands on the balcony railing and looked gloomily at the tall and magnificent castle in the center of the capital. Hearing the steady footsteps approaching behind him, the young man said without turning his head, "Sir Ryan, do you think we will win?" "Yes, your highness Miserve," Ryan said calmly and firmly. Shivengog killed his brother and usurped the throne. The court nobles were dissatisfied with his behavior. Nearly half of them had their noble titles abolished. The nobles were dissatisfied with his evil deeds. Now, you have persuaded the Principality of Leamington to help you delay the Eastern governor who supports Shivengog. As expected, the Kingdom of Facity has not given up the opportunity to attack the Principality. The army of the Northern Province cannot rush to the capital to support the royal capital. The Marquis Taylor, who is loyal to His Majesty, has also separated half of the standing army of the Southern Province to the royal capital. Your Highness, Shivengog will definitely lose, Ryan analyzed calmly and sharply. Really? Miss F. Gog's tone was a little hesitant and wavering. But, those worshippers have not expressed their attitudes. I'm worried. Ryan frowned. His Highness Miss F was too timid, but he was still the most legitimate and reasonable heir to the Principality. Ryan and the family behind him had no choice. Your Highness, not expressing your attitude is the best attitude. At least they have no tendency to support Shivengog. Ryan paused for a moment and said solemnly, besides, we have a helper that they can never expect. Miss F said doubtfully, that person will really help us. Instead of, who? Before Miss F finished speaking, Ryan shouted sharply and instantly prepared a spell to deal with the attacker. In the panic of Miss F and the sharp and vigilant eyes of Ryan, a tall figure covered in a black linen robe walked out from behind a bookcase. Ryan was completely unable to sense the aura of the other person, which only proved that the gap between him and the other person was too big. Ryan's face turned a little pale. Who is this person? He was able to get past the protection of 1,000 royal guards and let the leader of the royal guards, who was a level 8 knight, approach His Highness Misev's residence without noticing. The black-robed man stretched out his hand covered with blue scales and snapped his fingers, dispelling the spell in Ryan's hand. It's been a short time since we last met, and you're going to treat me, a guest from afar, like this? The black-robed man took off his hood, revealing a dragonborn face covered with blue scales. Ryan immediately lost his usual calmness and said excitedly, Lord Long N. Chapter 39 Preparations of both parties. Lord Long. It's great that you've woken up, Ryan said excitedly. Before he left, Long was still asleep. He just sent a letter to Long with a trial mentality, but he didn't expect that Long had woken up. After sleeping for more than 2 months, Lord Long should be stronger. But you look Dragonborn, using transfiguration to look at my own face. What? Isn't it handsome? Ryan wiped the cold sweat from his forehead and said, no, that's not what I meant. By the way, please allow me to introduce you. This is the son of Grand Duke Boran, His Highness Miss F. Gog. Hearing Ryan's exclamation, Miss F also reacted that this dragonborn creature should be the lawful blue dragon with the spirit of contract that Ryan mentioned. Miss F also bowed slightly excitedly. Please allow me to thank you in advance for your help to Boran, Lord Long. Long waved his hand at him. You pay the gold coins and I pay the labor. It's just a fair trade. Ryan raised his hand to lead the way and said, it's not convenient to talk here. Please follow me. Long nodded and walked into a hidden reception room. Ryan pressed the wall and triggered a switch. The crystal chandelier on the ceiling shone brightly under the effect of the spell, illuminating the reception room as bright as day. Walking across the luxurious velvet carpet with indigo and dark gold, Ryan led Long to a long table. Long chose a chair and sat down without hesitation, picked up the fruit on the exquisite ceramic plate on the table, and took a bite. After Ryan and Mizur sat down, Long asked while chewing the fruit in his mouth, tell me, what's the situation? What do you need me to do? Ryan repeated the current situation and said to Long, the main force of the rebels is now delayed at the border by the sudden war. There are only 3,000 troops left in the royal capital, and the royal guards loyal to the royal family have 1,000 people. The leader of the guards, Sir Andre, is an 8th level knight. The rebels dare not commit the evil deeds of breaking into the palace and massacring the nobles for the time being. Through confrontation and negotiation, the rebel king agreed to hold a general council of the nobles, but the rebel king will definitely secretly bribe or threaten some nobles in exchange for them giving up their votes and abstaining from voting, so that the support rate of both sides cannot reach 1/3, thereby achieving the effect of delaying time. At this point, Ryan smiled and greeted Longen, saying, our original plan was to cooperate with the rebel king to delay time and wait for the nobles in the southern provinces who supported the royalists to secretly send troops to rescue the capital and directly force those wavering nobles to take sides and force the rebel king to step down. But your early arrival has made things simpler, and our chances of winning and room for maneuver are greater. Mizur nodded excitedly and said, that's right, Lord Longen, we just need to put all our chips on the noble meeting in 2 days, and then you will come out of nowhere at the critical moment, and the nobles and the court wizards who have not expressed their opinions will naturally know how to choose. Longen casually put the fruit core he had just eaten on the exquisite cashmere tablecloth, indicating that he understood. You take care of your own affairs, make preparations for what you want to do, and notify me after you have determined the time and place. The subsequent issue of remuneration did not take much time. Mizur generously promised 300,000 gold coins or other equivalents, and Longen was also satisfied with this. It's just an appearance fee. It's not appropriate to ask for too high a price. Since the other party has already raised the price, there is no need to ask for a higher price. Longen is such a principled dragon. 300,000 gold coins are enough to hire an adult dragon, but Mizur is not reluctant at all. First, they have no way to hire other real dragons, and second, they can't guarantee the quality of the real dragons willing to be hired. Longen is just the right partner for them. He is not particularly powerful, but lawful and trustworthy. Besides, as long as he ascends to the position of Grand Duke, what is 300,000 gold coins? Using 300,000 gold coins to exchange for the position of Grand Duke is a win-win for him. The hiring fee is settled on the spot, and it does not support post-payment. Longen put on a serious expression of official business and glanced at a little bastard who set a trap in the contract. Ryan smiled awkwardly. Mizur's face was a little unnatural. It was obvious that it was not so easy for him to pay 300,000 gold coins or equivalent on the spot, but he still forced a smile and said, of course, but can I raise some money and pay you the reward tomorrow? Yes. Longen nodded in agreement. Lord Longen, I can fulfill the original contract after I take back Carter Castle. The reward has been sorted out in advance and can be paid to you tomorrow. Ryan added. Longen nodded with satisfaction. This kid is sensible, and he doesn't need to waste his breath to collect the debt. Then, Miss Ev mentioned the idea of offering Longen for a long time in the future. Long N did not agree or refuse, but just said ambiguously that he would consider it. After talking for a while, Long N was taken to a room by Ryan to rest. Ryan returned to the reception room, and Miss Evelyn back in a chair, looking completely relaxed. Lord Ryan, I can finally rest assured now. I think we should have a bottle of red wine to celebrate. Miss Ev joked. Ryan shook his head imperceptibly and responded, Your Highness, it's not time to relax yet. We should all remain cautious before you are recrowned. What we have to do now is to notify the Noble Council and the Rebel King first to change the venue of the meeting from the Royal Palace meeting hall to an open place so that our reinforcement can land. Miserve thought for a moment and smiled. Then notify Marquis Fleus to change the meeting to the central square so that the subjects can see the process of the meeting and the majesty of the real dragon. Let them witness our victory and celebrate the coronation of their Grand Duke. Ryan bowed and said, As you wish, Your Majesty. In accordance with your orders, the 4 border counties of the northern province have completed the handover with the Kingdom of Facity. The Northern Army Group, which is marching at full speed, is expected to arrive at the royal capital before midnight tomorrow. However, news has been sent back from the south that the standing army of the southern province seems to have made unusual movements. It may be that Marquis Taylor is secretly supporting Your Highness Miserve. In addition, Your Highness Miserve asked Marquis Fleus to change the venue of the Noble Council to the central square. I wonder if it is necessary. Ziwan George, who was sitting on the white chair, sneered and said disdainfully, Let my poor nephew toss around for 2 more days. Tell Marquis Fleus to follow Miserve's wishes. Anyway, he will not make trouble again in 2 days. Yes, I will inform those gentlemen right away. Chapter 40. Get the money first, and then do the work. Knock knock knock. There was a knock on the door. Come in, the door is not locked. Ryan pushed open the door of the guest bedroom and saw Long, who looked like a dragon, lying on his side on the pillow, holding a major research notebook in his hand, and reading it carefully. Ryan bowed slightly, and asked out of the courtesy of the host, Lord Long, did you sleep well last night? Long patted the soft and light goose down quilt covering his body and said, Not bad, but the mattress is a little too soft, not as good as Simmons. Although Ryan didn't know what the word Simmons meant, he guessed that it should be some very expensive and rare fabric, so expensive and rare that he, the heir of the Marquis, had never heard of it. Please forgive me for the poor hospitality. Ryan said, We have prepared some simple food. His Highness Miss F hopes to invite you to have lunch together. Long was also a little curious about the food of humans in this world, and wanted to see what these nobles and rich people could eat, so he agreed immediately. After getting dressed, Long N, under the guidance of Ryan, walked up the stairs, through the corridors, and came to the dining room in the castle to entertain guests. When they came to the long table, Long N sat down opposite Miss F, and Ryan sat in the main seat as the host. Good morning, Lord Long N. Today's weather is very good. I hope tomorrow's weather will be good, so that your appearance will be more majestic and shining. Miss F smiled with a little flattery and said, I wonder what you think of my proposal yesterday? Long N knew that he was referring to the fact that the Principality of Boran had signed a long-term contract with him and hired him as a security guard at a high salary. Long N could understand his feelings, but for a son of a Grand Duke, a Crown Prince, this was really a bit too impatient. Long N played with the silver knife and fork on the table, cut off a small piece of the appetizer that had just been served, and put it into his mouth, chewing and saying, Let's talk about it after tomorrow's matter is finished. Well, the crispy shell with the thick milky shrimp paste filled in it, plus a little bit of spice powder and some sour fruit juice, makes the whole look more refreshing and tastes good. Miss F heard the perfunctory tone in Long N's tone, and his smile was a little stiff, but he soon returned to his previous state and smiled. You are right. After tomorrow's matter is resolved, we will have enough time to talk in detail. Then Miss F changed the subject, and brought the content to the food they enjoyed. Although Long N didn't have a good impression of the son of the Grand Duke, and felt that he was not even as good as Ryan, he had to say that he was still a bit like the Crown Prince in terms of provoking topics for conversation. No matter what he talked about, he could talk eloquently, speak clearly without making people feel bored, and he could also put on a listening attitude at the right time. But Long N felt that it was a little deliberate. What kind of person Miss F was had nothing to do with Long N, as long as he completed the transaction honestly and handed the gold coins to Long N. While dealing with the conversation between Miss F and Ryan, Long N, in line with the principle of shameful waste, stuffed all the subsequent main meals into his mouth. Long N picked up the napkin beside him and wiped his hideous mouth. Ryan, who had already put down his knife and fork, stood up and said, "Lord Long N, our award is ready. Do you need to take you there now?" Long N readily agreed. Led by Ryan, the three of them walked to the lower level of the castle together, and then continued to walk along the steps leading to the underground. As they moved forward, a bunch of torches lit up in front of them, and went out after they passed. The three of them came to a heavy and thick stone door. The family guards on duty saluted Ryan, and after verifying their identities, they opened the stone door. Long N followed Ryan's footsteps, and walked into the door. His powerful dark vision allowed him to see piles of wooden boxes filled with gold coins and gems in the darkness, as well as various magical equipment placed on the shelves emitting spells. Ryan turned on the magic crystal lamp in the treasure house and made a gesture of invitation to Long N. "Lord Long N, in addition to the part of the reward I gave you before, the reward that His Highness Miss F and I promised to pay is all here, a total of 280,000 gold coins, and gems equivalent to 100,000 gold coins." Long N pointed to the piles of large wooden boxes. Long N walked forward, opened a large wooden box, grabbed a handful of gold coins, and smiled with satisfaction. "Money always makes dragons happy," Ryan said again. "In addition, you can also choose 5 things from this treasure house at will. This is my personal thank you." Ryan's ancestor was once friends with a powerful adult silver dragon. He had contact with real dragons when he was a child, and he knew how much benefit it would have to maintain friendship with a real dragon. Even if it was the silver dragon who ignored the world, His Excellency the Pure Silver Eye, Corelia's father, with its casual guidance and a little help, the Lionheart family could have a powerful high-level wizard. Ryan wanted to maintain their relationship with Long. In his opinion, the evil of the 5-colored dragon never seemed to be reflected in Long. Instead, its words and deeds were more inclined to metal dragons, and it was a worthy investment. Long turned his head and glanced at Ryan, smiled silently, and said, "Then I won't be polite." Long went straight to the display cabinet, where magic equipment was placed. The claws and body of the real dragon were already powerful enough, but Long didn't mind having more offensive means. The scaly claws brushed over the staffs one by one, and Long finally chose an electric staff suitable for a high-level wizard of the 7th ring and a soul staff also for high-level wizards. Long glanced at the magic armor, and didn't look at it again. He and his family couldn't wear human armor. Long N was wandering back and forth in front of other display cases that stored various treasures, struggling over what to choose. It would be great if he could pack up all the treasures of the Lionheart family and take them away, but unfortunately he could only choose 5. Suddenly, Long N paused, pointed to a piece of pure white jade in the display case that was protected by various spells, and asked, "What is this?" Ryan looked at what Long N was pointing at and said, "That was when a high-ranking wizard ancestor of the family traveled to the continent of Onia. He encountered an electric eel sea monster in the ocean at the southern end of the continent. He killed the sea monster and took it out of its body. We can't be sure what it is, but we only know that it should be considered a relatively precious and rare thing, so we have kept it in the treasure house." Long N was thoughtful. There was a little bit of a faint smell on the jade that made him feel a little familiar, so he put it in his bag. In the end, after picking and choosing, there was nothing worth taking, so Long N simply chose 2 magic crystals of extremely high quality and large size. This thing can be eaten and used, and it is easy and straightforward to choose. You just need to compare the quality and size, so you don't have to keep looking back and forth in front of the display cabinet, worrying about which one is better, and making yourself want to take them all away. Chapter 41 Unhappy. The sky was clear, the sun at the end of the harvest month was bright but not hot, and with a breeze, it was a good day for the coronation. Miss Ev looked up at the sky in a carriage, protected by the royal guards. There was nothing to see in the blue sky, except a white cloud. The central square, where the civilians had long been dispersed, was closely guarded by the private soldiers of Marquis Fliz, the president of the Council of Nobles. Hundreds of nobles gathered in the square with different expressions. For the dignity of the nobles, hundreds of high-backed chairs had been arranged in the square, and the nobles sat down according to their titles and status. Long N, who had been hovering in the sky and hidden in the cloud that Miss Ev saw, looked down at the small central square next to the castle in the center of the palace and watched the human beings standing on the square, as small as ants, but still clearly visible to him, enter. Then, Miss Ev's carriage drove to the square, and the palace also opened the palace gate, and a carriage drove in. Long N watched as the two carriages sent out one person each to engage in a heated debate-like conversation, gradually arguing until their faces turned red and their hands danced, and they were just about to fight on the spot. According to what they had agreed in advance, after this debate, Miss Ev would go on stage to give a speech to the noble council to win the psychological approval of most of the council members, and Long N descended from the sky at the same time as Miss Ev pointed his finger to the sky, completely winning the nobles to his side. Miss Ev raised his head and felt the gaze directed at him. He turned his head and met the teasing, disdainful and vicious eyes of his uncle, Zhuang. After a moment of panic, Miss Ev mustered up the courage to look directly at Zhuang and then walk to the center of the square with a confident posture with his head held high. He was full of confidence, not only for his speech, but also for the help he prepared for himself. Zhuang stood outside the square, watching all this with a sneer, and made a gesture with his hands behind his back, and the guards standing by quietly withdrew from the crowd. Long N flapped his wings and hovered, waiting for Miss Ev's signal. Suddenly, he vaguely sensed something was wrong. Some civilians were moving towards the central square. This was normal in normal times, but now the central square was blocked in advance, and civilians were prohibited from going there. Logically, no one would go there on purpose. In the streets, there were only a dozen people on each street heading towards the central square, which was not noticeable. But when Long N looked down from the sky, he could see a group of people dressed as civilians heading towards the central square at the same time, like a circle of encirclement shrinking towards the center. Stupid, you dare to enter the capital with only 200 of the 1,000 royal guards. Aren't you posing for others to chop you down? The situation had changed, and he couldn't wait for Miss Ev to finish his speech. Long N lowered his center of gravity, flapped his wings, accelerated downwards, and issued a dragon roar warning in midair. Everyone looked up at the sky in amazement. A blue dragon was falling from the sky. How could there be a dragon? Question mark? Since it was not a dragon he found, it was probably the hidden power of his nephew. Zhuang waved his hand decisively, and the private soldiers of Marquis Fliss who were deployed immediately rushed to Miss Ev in the center of the square. Although Miss Ev was surprised and angry that Marquis Fliss, the chairman of the noble council who was promoted by his father, actually betrayed him, he was prepared for it with Long's roar. The royal guards quickly surrounded Miss Ev, and the wizards who were protected with Miss Ev began to chant, and the magic lights flashed frequently. Flames, vines, strong winds, all flew towards the enemy. A group of nobles fled the scene in panic, but some nobles also had powerful extraordinary powers. They either killed the royal guards, or tried their best to stop the private soldiers who launched the attack. Zhuang asked all the guards to rush up, and he also drew the sword at his waist. He had been in the army for decades, and was also an 8th level knight. He understood that he had to kill his nephew as quickly as possible. Only in this way could he negotiate with the Blue Dragon. No matter what kind of cooperation contract his nephew had signed with the Blue Dragon, as long as Miss F died, the contract would naturally be invalid. At that time, it was just a greedy and stupid 5-color real dragon, and he could afford to hire it at a higher price. Zhuang rushed into the battlefield with a sword. Before he killed the first noble who blocked him, he had already released a bunch of brute force spells, imposing aura, magic armor, weapon blessings and other knight skills to bless himself. When he rushed to the front of the guards, a swordsman who was so fast that he left an afterimage finally rushed out of the guards and blocked Zhuang's sword that was stabbed at the guards. Andre, the leader of the royal guards, was an 8th level knight. Zhuang raised his sword and entangled with Andre. The two were close, but Zhuang had been in the army for many years, and his moves were more deadly, and he had a tendency to suppress Andre. but Andre was just trying to delay Zuengeoj because their reinforcement that fell from the sky were about to arrive. Zuengeoj, who fought several swords at a very fast speed, but still could not break through, showed no anxiety on his face, but a strange sneer. In fact, his real purpose was just to lead the 8th level knight away from Misev, and he was creating opportunities for the others. Not far away from the royal palace, a tower taller than the royal castle shot out 3 powerful spell rays, heading straight for Misev, who was heavily protected. The first ray burned through the 2 royal guards who blocked it with their bodies, and shattered the mana shield activated by the triggered magic equipment on Misev's body. The second ray froze the protective barrier condensed by the spell scroll that Misev activated in a panic. The third ray penetrated the frozen spell barrier and hit Misev, who had no time to save himself. Misev looked down in disbelief, watching in fear as his body quickly dissolved in the last ray. All this was different from what he thought, just like he didn't know that Marquis Fliss had betrayed the royal family, and didn't know that several enshrined mages had actually made their choices. After Zuengeoj cut off Andre with a sword, he laughed loudly in the strong wind pressure. Watching the blue dragon flapping its wings and landing in the crowd of people who were trying to avoid it, Zuengeoj raised the knight's sword in his hand and said loudly, "Misev Geoj is dead. I, Zuengeoj, the most legitimate heir of the Geoj family. I'm officially crowned the Grand Duke here. All nobles lay down their weapons, and I will forgive the sins of the traitors." Zuengeoj looked at the nobles who supported Misev with satisfaction, and threw away their weapons, and looked at the blue dragon who didn't say a word with satisfaction. He saluted and smiled. "As for you, the powerful real dragon, I'm willing to pay twice the reward of my nephew in exchange for your friendship." He gave me 300,000 gold coins, twice as 900,000 gold coins, Longen said playfully. Zuengeoj was stunned for a moment, then smiled and said, "Your calculation is correct. Yes, 900,000 gold coins. TSK, TSK, TSK. Longen shook his head. "You are so rich. Just give me 1 million gold coins." Zuengeoj sneered in his heart. He had expected the greed of the real dragon, and at the same time he was sure of his safety in front of this greedy real dragon. "Of course, respected real dragon. For your friendship, 1 million gold coins are completely worth it." Just as he relaxed, a dragon claw shining with violent thunder quickly enlarged in his eyes. Zuengeoj, who only had time to pull out half of the sword, was torn into several sections with the sword. The blood was splattered, the internal organs were steaming, and the head flew out with a puzzled look. Why? This dragon refused 1 million gold coins? Why did he die? The crowd around was dead silent. Longen shook his claws, as if they were stuck with something dirty, and said, "Don't think about it, I just don't like you." Chapter 42 Boring Humans. Longen looked down, and saw Zuengeoj's head. His head seemed to have heard what he had just said, and his eyes changed from doubt to resentment and malice. TSK, bad luck. Longen opened his mouth, and a mouthful of bright blue plasma spewed out from between his throat fangs, turning into a thunder and lightning, turning Zuengeoj's body into a piece of charred charcoal. The nobles around retreated to the edge of the square, looking at the huge, strong and healthy blue creature in front of them in shock, and the charred remains of Zuengeoj's face vaguely visible on the ground. Everyone present had their brains temporarily shut down. The son of the Grand Duke, the first legitimate heir, died, and the first heir of the royal collateral line who killed the former also died. The death was so sudden that no one was prepared. Now the royal family of the Principality of Balan, the bloodline of the Geoj family, only has the 2 sons of the regicide and parricide Zuengeoj left. Do they have to welcome the heir of a person who violated the noble law as the Grand Duke? It was okay for Zuengeoj before. He led the army to surround the capital, and the nobles could only be forced to accept it, or just pretend not to see it, in order to protect themselves. But now Zuengeoj is dead. How can the nobles who have regained their freedom still be loyal to his son, who is far away on the border? The nobles had different thoughts, but everyone was concerned about Longen on the square, and did not dare to speak rashly, for fear that this unpredictable blue dragon with unpredictable thoughts and personality would be unhappy with them, and cut them into several pieces with one claw. Some people placed their hopes on the high-ranking mages in the palace and cast their eyes on the tall mage tower, but the high-ranking mages who could compete with the real dragon in front of them never showed up. In the high tower, several mages looked at each other in silence. They were confident that they could fight against the young blue dragon in terms of magic, or even surpass it, but they also saw the speed that Longen burst out when he killed Ziwangeoj, which made them extremely afraid, and chose to stay in the safe mage tower. Moreover, they had just helped Ziwangeoj kill the son of the Grand Duke, but now Ziwangeoj was also dead. No matter who succeeded to the throne, in order to ensure that their succession was legitimate, they would first take action against these worshippers, who were charged with betrayal and regicide. Although several powerful high-ranking mages were unlikely to lose their lives, they should also consider their future. Longen glanced at Renan, who was standing in a daze beside the body of Miss F, which was melted and corroded to the point that only his hands and feet were left under the protection of the guards, and shook his head imperceptibly. Longen suddenly spoke in silence. "Humans, choose someone who can represent you to come out and talk to me." The silent crowd immediately made a noise, as if venting their oppression, dissatisfaction, and fear. Their arguments were almost shouting, which made Longen feel noisy. The noise of the dog-headed people was at least praise, but this group of human nobles was like a group of barking hyenas. Silence. The real dragon's warning with dragon power quieted the noisy crowd, and then took out a handkerchief to wipe the cold sweat on his forehead, and spoke in a low voice. Finally, the nobles pushed the speaker of the noble council, Fliss, out to talk to Longen. Although he could also be counted as a traitor, he was the one with the highest title and the oldest qualifications among the people present, and he was also the speaker of the noble council, so he could naturally represent the nobles the most. As for whether the traitors who assisted Ziwangeoj in killing His Highness Misef would be liquidated, that could only be discussed later. Fliss also understood this. In order to save his family and his own life, he had to satisfy all the nobles and the real dragon in front of him. Longen looked at the noble old man in luxurious clothes, shaking his legs slightly, and walked up to him pretending to be calm, bowed and saluted, saying, "Powerful and noble true dragon, my name is Flissjid, the chairman of the noble council of the Principality of Balan, and I have come to..." Longen waved his hand to interrupt him, which frightened Fliss, and said, "No need to talk nonsense. I just want to know, is there any legal heir to the Principality of Balan now? Except for the offspring of those pieces of carbon." "A few pieces of carbon." Fliss glanced at the body of Ziwangeoj out of the corner of his eye, and replied respectfully, "Your Majesty, the Grand Duke's father's sister married the previous Grand Duke of Leamington, and gave birth to his offspring, namely the current Grand Duke of Leamington. According to the law of inheritance of noble blood, the son of Grand Duke Leamington also has the right to inherit the Principality of Balan." Fliss thought for a moment, and added, "Also, Grand Duke Leamington has 4 sons, and the second one is just the right age to be selected as the heir." Longen nodded with a little regret. "In that case, you can solve the rest of the problems by yourselves. My contract with Misef has been completed, and the affairs of the Principality of Balan have nothing to do with me anymore. It's a pity that these nobles are intermarried with each other, and their blood is intertwined. It is difficult for a big family to die suddenly. There are always a few legal heirs who have been separated from the family for generations. Otherwise, Longen might be able to get a Grand Duke." After hearing Longen's words, the nobles around him became active instantly. Some of them supported Miss Evans and supported Ziwangeoj before, but the new Grand Duke heir is still far away in the neighboring country, and everything that happened on the scene has nothing to do with him. There is a lot of room for maneuver here. In a moment, it may be your own life and death and the rise and fall of your family. The nobles who were originally united because of Longen's pressure suddenly became different. Fliss suddenly said to Longen, "Respected true dragon, I wonder if you are willing to accept another deal. I will pay you a satisfactory reward." The nobles were shocked. This old man reacted quickly. If he got the support of this true dragon, he would definitely have an advantage in the subsequent open and secret struggles, and maybe even save the entire family from liquidation. "No," Longen said coldly, "you humans should solve your own problems." The nobles all breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, this true dragon directly rejected Marquis Fliss. Longen watched all this coldly. He was also a human in his previous life. He felt that it was meaningless to watch these humans with backward systems and ideas fighting each other. Although he felt a little distressed to refuse the gold coins, he still decided to stick to his original intention and not take some money. At the end, Long N added, "Of course, I'm happy to accept employment with suitable conditions and prices after you have solved your own problems." Long N flapped his wings, stirring up a strong wind, then turned his head to look at Ryan, who was still a little dazed, and said, "Ryan Leon." Ryan suddenly woke up and looked at Long N. "The rest of the things will be left to you humans to solve, but I can do you one last favor." Long N paused for a moment and said, "Identify a few guys you hate." This employment was not completed very well, so just treat it as after sales service. "I practiced driving all day and didn't get home until 7 o'clock. The update is late. I beg you to vote and read it. Thank you very much. I kept my foot on the clutch when I was eating, typing, and taking a shower, for fear that the car would stall if I lifted my foot too much, and it was numb." Chapter 43, Show Off Your Wealth. Ryan's eyes moved away from the pool of Miss F and looked at Long. He was tough but strong-willed. He hoped to punish those who had committed evil deeds against the Lionheart family, but he also understood that the situation was already like this. The declining Lionheart family was now a piece of fat meat, and the heinous Miss F they supported had also turned into a pool of rotten liquid that could not provide shelter for the Lionheart family. Taking a deep breath, Ryan slowly spit out a string of names, a total of 17 people. Since Long N gave him the opportunity, he should not waste it. For the other people in the Lionheart family, and for the future of the Lionheart family, he must do whatever it takes. Long N raised his eyebrows and looked at Ryan seriously. Then, with no change in his expression, he turned his head to look at the nobles standing in a group, grinned with a ferocious mouth, and repeated the name that Ryan said. "Please step forward." If the name was just read, just based on its words, it wants the nobles to die. This is simply an insult to the honor of the nobles. The nobles were dissatisfied and looked at each other, but no one dared to stop them. Sim even stepped back and isolated the noble whose name was just read. There was no one around them, which was very conspicuous. Long N nodded with satisfaction and said, "Thank you for your cooperation." The isolated nobles either trembled in despair and fear, or looked at the nobles who had worked closely with them for help. Finally, under great pressure, a noble who was named suddenly took out a spell scroll and was about to tear it open, but his speed was not faster than lightning. A bolt of lightning appeared out of thin air and struck the head of the noble. His body was hollowed out by a long-term extravagant life, and he was not strong. He was only a 4th level knight, and died neatly under Long N's lightning. This was an ability that Long N suddenly mastered after being struck by lightning many times in the Storm Sea. He only needed to consume the static electricity stored in his scales, muscles, and blood to lock all the static electricity around him and release lightning. Moreover, the power of lightning can increase with the amount of static electricity it consumes, and the release speed is also very fast, which is a very good ability. He dealt with a few guys who still had a little bit of noble honor and bravely attacked Long N desperately. The remaining people finally collapsed and stood there waiting to be killed. Several pairs of miniature dragon claws condensed in the air and skillfully completed the operation of touching the corpses and exploding gold coins on the dozen nobles who died in his hands. Long N stuffed the magic equipment he touched into the storage ring and opened a few scales to put the storage ring into it. He turned back again, looking at Ryan, whose eyes were gradually becoming mature, cautious, and indifferent, and said, "I can only help you so far, kid." Ryan bowed respectfully and thanked him from the bottom of his heart. "Thank you for your help, Lord Long N. I won't bother you with the rest." He knew that Long N's help to him was not only to eliminate his enemies, but also to tell the nobles present that he had a special relationship with Long N, which was equivalent to announcing to them that, if they wanted to attack Ryan, they had to consider the tyrannical blue dragon behind him. This was an invisible protection. Long N nodded, and once again raised a strong wind, making the people around the square feel as if they were suffocated by a storm, and flapped his wings and flew away. This time he did not deliberately hide his figure. The majestic figure with a body length of 13 meters and a wingspan of 15 meters flew low over the sky of the capital and flew westward amid the exclamations of civilians, soldiers, serfs, and adventurers. All the stories of seeing real dragons will become the talk of the town. At the same time, the name of the real dragon that appeared, Stormlord, has gradually become known through stories and rumors. Long N's huge shadow returned to Storm Mountain, covering the family members who were kneeling on the ground to pay their respects. He flapped his wings and landed in front of the dragon's nest. As he walked in, he said, "Let the other two real dragons and Blue Ear come to see me." The dragon-veined dog-headed man stood proudly in the shadow of the dragon's nest and quickly got into the cave beside him. Long N walked into the nest and emptied the 2 boxes that were filled with soil and covered with gold coins to support the scene. Then, he dumped wooden boxes one by one, and more than 200,000 gold coins were piled into a pile of gold. The shining gems were even more dazzling between the gold coins. Pieces of magic equipment were also randomly piled around the gold coins by Long N. This trip to the capital of Balan was only 3 days long, but he made a lot of money. Looking at the nest filled with gold coins and treasures, Long N's displeasure finally disappeared. Blue Ear came out of the cave leading directly to the dragon's nest and prostrated himself respectfully. "With great master, Blue Ear Wolf, I come here to obey your call, Wolf." As if knowing that his weird dragon language pronunciation would make the master angry, Blue Ear was deliberately correcting the muscles of his tongue and mouth, reducing the frequency of unconscious noise. Long N casually learned about the progress of the work of the various tribes in the territory, and Vidalpin came to the dragon's nest. As soon as he entered the dragon's nest, Vidalpin stared with his eyes wide open and stayed for a long time, spitting out an exaggerated sentence. "Wow, why are you the only one here? Where is Kirelia?" Long N asked. Vidalpin stared at the pile of gold coins and Long N without moving his eyes, and replied, "The teleportation array in the territory has been drawn, and she took Glengo to the west of Storm Mountain Range." Seeing Vidalpin's stunned look, Long N smiled and said, "Don't try to take my treasure." The human-shaped Vidalpin jumped up instantly, like an angry goose, stretched his neck, and his face turned red, protesting, "You are slandering. How could the great golden dragon do such a thing?" Long N rolled his eyes, took out a box from the storage ring, and handed it to Vidalpin with the dragon's hand. "This is yours. It's the agreed 10,000 gold coins. In view of your good work attitude, I will pay you in advance." In fact, Long N was afraid that the money would be kept in his hands for a long time and he would be reluctant to give it to them. Hearing this, Vidalpin immediately opened the wooden box in front of him excitedly, his eyes shining with the gold coins, and he wanted to start counting these lovely gold coins one by one on the spot. To prevent Kirelia's gold coins from being embezzled, I will give her her share after she comes back, Long N added. Vidalpin, whose soul had just been soothed by the gold coins, instantly jumped up and said, "You are insulting my dragon. I will sue you for defamation." Long N smiled, and then asked about the current situation of the mutated fire lizard. Kirelia told him that, after being slapped by Long N, the fire lizard seemed to be a little disillusioned, and lost its fighting spirit. It honestly went back underground, and did not run around again. At this time, an elegant figure walked in from outside the dragon's nest. Kirelia just walked into the dragon's nest, and her eyes widened, and her mouth opened wide. "Wow, wow, so many votes. Thank you for the votes." Dreaming Eyeing. Chapter 44. Dwarfs start working. After showing off her wealth and paying her salary, Kirelia suddenly remembered what she was here for. By the way, Ron, Glengo has already drawn the teleportation arrays on both sides. I use the teleportation array to come back first, and by the way, I tested whether the teleportation array can be used normally. The dwarfs should be teleporting now. It was quite bold to use himself as an experiment. However, with the powerful control and resistance of the true dragon to the element, it was quite appropriate to use himself as an experiment. Ron said, "Then let's go and take a look together." Ron and Vidalpin followed Kirelia to the place where the teleportation array was drawn. In a clearing in the forest, where the trees had been cut down, the roots had been dug out and refilled, a magic array with a diameter of 5 meters was operating. Groups of dwarves appeared out of thin air from the magic array and then walked out of the magic array dizzy and disoriented due to the discomfort caused by the distortion of space. The teleportation array had to stop for 10 minutes each time it was running to avoid overload and damage to the teleportation array. After a few pauses, almost all the dwarves walked out of the teleportation array, and Copperhammer, accompanied by Glengo, led the last few dwarves into the teleportation array. "Welcome to my territory," Longen grinned. "Copperhammer, I'll vomit Long. Sorry." "Oh, I can swear to Auntie Kamana, this thing is much worse than seasickness. The last time I vomited was when I first boarded the ship, when I was 110 years old." Glengo also came over and saluted Long, saying, "Great master, your loyal servant has completed your order. I wonder if you are satisfied with this." Long nodded and was about to let Glengo leave first, but unexpectedly, Copperhammer jumped up and patted Glengo on the shoulder and said, "Hey man. Thank you for treating my poor nephew and crew members. If it weren't for you, they would probably have diarrhea until they were dehydrated and then go to see Moradin. As a small giant, to be honest, you look much more pleasing to the eye than other giants. Next time I have time, I will treat you to a drink." Glengo's old face forced a smile, and the relationship between the two seemed to be pretty good. Long glanced at Glengo. He knew the purpose of this hill giant shaman. Long valued these dwarves so much that it cast a spell to heal them, keeping these property belonging to Long in a healthy state of value, to show its dedication to work. As for making friends with the Copperhammer, Long believed that Grengo did it on purpose. There was an irreconcilable conflict between Grengo and the Wildhorns tribe. The number of goblins was too small to be effective, and the kobolds were devoted to serving Long, so it could not intervene. In order to achieve its own goals, it could only seize this opportunity to build a good relationship with this group of dwarves who were of great use to Long. As long as Long gave it a chance, it could show its value and let Long see its ability. Only in this way would it have the opportunity to be reused, instead of being put aside alone like before, and taking it out to use when there was something it needed to do. It knew very well that it was just a fairly useful tool for Long now. Once Long's strength continued to grow, or there was a more suitable person to replace it, it would inevitably be discarded. Since they were short of manpower and couldn't leave everything to Corellia, Long gave it a chance if Glengo wanted one. Long said casually, "Since you have a good relationship, then Glengo will be responsible for coordinating work with you in the future." Glengo bowed deeply. "Thank you for your trust, great master." Copperhammer, according to the principle of fair exchange, it's your turn to fulfill your promise now. Long looked at Copperhammer and smiled. From being rescued by Long to helping them escape from the desperate coast, Copperhammer believed that Long was a unique blue dragon. He not only abided by the order, but was also kind and just, otherwise he would not have been favored by the platinum dragon god. After they saw the silver dragon Corellia who claimed to be working for Long, they became more convinced of their point of view. Copperhammer immediately agreed. "Of course, respectful and friendly real dragon, I think you should be in need of a group of good blacksmiths. We are very happy to serve you, haha. You can always trust the dwarf's forge hammer." Long grinned and was very satisfied with Copperhammer. After Tancha led the dwarves to choose a place to live, Long ordered the Tauren and kobolds to make building stones and wood for the dwarves, and help them build houses. The kingdom of the dwarves is usually built in rocky mountains. They hollow out the mountains, build cities in them, and build solid fortresses relying on the protection of the mountains. But it takes hundreds or thousands of years for a strong dwarf tribe to build such a magnificent city in the mountains. It is only a temporary residence for a few years, and the house built with stone bricks and wood is comfortable enough. At least for this group of dwarves who often drift on the sea and sleep in simple cabins all day. With the stone provided by the kobolds, the dwarves' residence was built quickly. After all, the crew of a ship are all male dwarves, and there is no need to divide the rooms by family. They can just build a few collective dormitories to live. On the contrary, it takes much more time to build the dwarves' workshops than to build houses. Dwarves, who don't care about houses, are very strict about forging places. They choose large and thick stone bricks. It is said that this is the only way to maintain the temperature in the forging room. A little temperature difference will affect the quality of the forged products, which is unbearable for the dwarves. In the dwarf kingdom, the city and the mountains, there is no need to worry about this problem. The mountain can preserve heat very well. They can even use the heat of magma. Here they can only try to improve working conditions as much as possible. In addition to the forging room, the dwarves also built a smelting furnace and a carbon kiln, which can produce charcoal for smelting and forging, and smelt the metal or ore materials excavated by the kobolds into metal ingots. The dwarves directly built a complete production line. It was not until the frost month was halfway through that the dwarves officially started work. The blazing fire melted the ore, just like the hot metal liquid of magma flowing into the special clay mold that had been prepared long ago. They were casting some necessary tools for themselves, such as hammers. After installing the handle on the cooled hammerhead, the dwarves can finally forge. According to Long's request, they need to make a bunch of weapons and armor for their families. These dwarves who sail on the sea are naturally gifted with the dwarven forging skills, and they don't feel unfamiliar with the hammers. What's more surprising is that Tang Chu is not only an excellent captain, a smart businessman, but also a skilled old blacksmith. In a short period of time, he made a set of iron armor and a huge iron axe suitable for slaughter, which amazed the other dwarves. I was a blacksmith for 300 years before I got on the ship, Tang Chu said proudly in the admiring eyes of the sailors. His nephew raised his hand. Uncle Tang Chu, didn't you say you got on the ship when you were 110 years old? Bang! A hammer flew to his head. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 45, Perception of the World. Boom. A tree with a diameter of 1 meter fell down with a loud bang. Sorta, wearing black and gold iron armor, and holding a black iron axe, still maintained the posture of chopping down the tree with one axe. The iron axe forged by Tang Chu himself made Sorta very satisfied. In the past, it often broke the stone axe because of its excessive strength or the enemy was too strong. The stone axe that took a day to make was almost a consumable in its hands. This was even more so after it was transformed into a dragon blood creature. The stone axe could not withstand the huge power of the dragon blood minotaurs. I'm afraid that in one battle, the minotaurs would have to spend a month to make the stone axes consumed. But this axe can not only withstand its power, but it is also heavier and sharper than the stone axe. Sorta stroked the axe blade with a gleam in his eyes. The combat effectiveness of the Crazy Horn tribe, which is fully equipped with this axe, can be directly increased by several %. How do you feel? Sorta turned around, knelt on one knee with a giant axe, bowed his head, and said to the huge blue dragon sitting in front of him, "It's a very powerful weapon, Great Master. With such a weapon, the Wild Horn tribe is confident that it can tear all enemies apart for you." Longen can already see a fully armed Tauran army. It will be a sharp blade that can scare the enemy. Any enemy who dares to stop them will fall under their iron hooves and giant axes. The 1.3 meter tall copper hammer quickly ran to the nearly 4 meter tall Sorta, knocking on the axe blade of the giant axe. After observing carefully, he saw a little curling of the blade and complained, "Big guy, your strength is even greater than that of the earth dragon. Damn it, your axe needs to be plated with a layer of fine steel." Longen smiled and said, "You decide on the specific improvements yourself, and leave professional matters to professionals. If you have any difficulties, tell Glengo, and he will coordinate them." Glengo on the side respectfully touched his chest and bent over. "Okay, you guys can do the rest of the tests on your own. Listen to Tang Chu for the specific test matters." Longen flapped his wings and flew into the air, leaving the testing site of the first batch of family equipment and flying back to the dragon's nest. Longen lay on the high pile of gold coins and took out a thick wizard's notebook from the storage ring. It was the reward that Corellia paid for Longen to release the mercenaries. Since the return of King Boran to the dragon's nest, Longen has been studying this notebook while the dwarves built houses, forges, and smelting furnaces. This is a lifetime notebook of a wizard who was promoted from the 4th ring to the 9th ring. Just reading the notebook of the previous wizard when he was still in the 4th and 5th rings has benefited Longen a lot. But Longen still couldn't construct a 5th ring spell. During this period, Long N tried several times, but failed inexplicably when the final spell structure was about to be constructed. Long N, who had no clue, asked Corellia and Vidalpin, but there was no record of this situation in the Dragon's Legacy. Long N even called Glengo to ask him in detail about his feelings when learning the 5-ring spell, but he got nothing. I felt something was wrong when I was constructing the 4-ring spell, as if something was hindering my mental power from constructing the spell structure. This feeling was even more obvious when I was constructing the 5-ring spell. Long N muttered to himself. But why did this happen? According to the information Long N got from various places, there has never been a record of Long N in this world. After pondering for such a long time, Long N had a vague guess in his heart. This world has never had such a situation, but the problem is that, strictly speaking, he does not belong to this world, at least not completely. His soul came from another world, a world without extraordinary powers, gods, real dragons, giants and other extraordinary creatures. Is it because my soul is in conflict with the rules of this world? Long N shook his head. If his soul was rejected by this world, then it is unlikely that he would be accepted by this world and reincarnated into a real dragon. It is more likely that he came to this world inexplicably and was rejected and crushed by this world and dissipated. The soul is an extremely fragile thing, not to mention that before reincarnation into this world, he was just an ordinary person who had never come into contact with supernatural powers, and his soul was even more fragile. Every time I build, it is the moment before the spell structure is about to take shape, and my mental power is still very sufficient, and my soul has not changed. Long N carefully recalled the previous failed construction experiences, trying to find the reason for the failure. All the principles of spells are to build spell structures, and then make the spell structures produce a specific oscillation frequency, and resonate with the magic dark sea at the same frequency. Magic dark sea, resonance. Long N frowned. The so-called magic dark sea is very similar to the sea of negative energy in the universe that he had heard of in his previous life, but the latter is just a guess, while the former is the source of all supernatural powers in this world. Whether it is a supernatural knight, a spellcaster, or a supernatural creature, they all rely on the dark sea to exist. This is a real sea of energy. Resonance with the magic dark sea. Long N suddenly thought of something, and released 3 apprentice level tricks in a row, and then released 3 first level spells in succession, followed by 3 second level spells. Immersed in the spiritual world, Long N felt the vibrations generated by the spell structure, and the resonances generated by the magic dark sea that immersed him, and the entire world. After releasing the 3rd and 4th level spells, Long N slowly opened his eyes. Sure enough, there is a problem with the resonance frequency of the spell structure and the dark sea. The higher the number of spell rings, the greater the resonance difference. The final stage of the spell structure construction will also trigger the resonance of the dark sea, and the failure of the construction is caused by the excessive resonance difference. The meditation of the caster and the training of the extraordinary knight, in addition to improving the power of the mind and body, are actually to establish their own understanding of the rules of the world, so as to make themselves closer to the vibration frequency of the dark sea. The degree of cognition of the world's rules is positively correlated with the degree of fit with the frequency of the dark sea's vibrations. Therefore, as long as the meditator's own cognition is not solidified and has not reached the endurance limit of his own soul and body, he can rely on the feedback of the dark sea's energy to advance. And extraordinary creatures such as true dragons are born to fit the frequency of the dark sea's vibrations. Therefore, they only need to grow with time to become stronger. But my soul is not a naturally born true dragon soul, so I can't cross this limitation of cognition of the world's rules. Long N tapped his fingertips on the wizard's notes, forcing himself to give up thinking about the cognition of the world that he had established since childhood in his previous life, and instead re-examine the world according to the insights in the wizard's notes. The spell structure was slowly outlined and filled in Long N's mind, and the 3-dimensional model constructed by countless lines and surfaces was gradually perfected until the last step, a curve perfectly and smoothly intersected with several lines. Long N exhaled heavily. The construction was successful. Chapter 46 A book. Long N suddenly felt a little dazed, and the world in front of him seemed to become distorted and strange. He cast a spell, and the water element gathered in front of him, and gradually condensed into a water ball. Long N frowned, his eyes were scattered, and his sight was not focused on the water ball. He asked himself silently, so, are you a water element or hydrogen oxide? Long N had a thought, and the real water ball in front of him quickly dissipated. He stared at the surroundings of the water ball, and could clearly see the water element dissipating in the air, and the light blue magic aura also disappeared. Long N has always believed that this world is just a magical version of the earth, with impurities called magic mixed in the foundation of science. But now he finally realized that he might have taken it for granted. This world has land, oceans, vegetation, and animals like the earth, but are they really made up of observable particles like the earth? If so, what about magic? What about the element that make up the world? Where should they be placed? Elements are completely different from molecules and atoms. Long N is very sure. Those elemental forces that can be taken out of thin air or even summoned from the elemental plane definitely cannot have any nonsense molecular atomic structure, but they can actually form entities that can be seen and touched by the naked eye. Long N shook his head to dispel all the weird and strange thoughts in his mind, and the world in front of him became solid and stable again. Long N knew that he might have accidentally touched the deepest secrets of this world, but this was not something he could explore now. Since the problem of the spell structure being unable to be constructed has been solved, it is better to improve his own strength first. What Long N should do now is to study and research more powerful spells. Winter month is coming, and the southern part of Onia begins to usher in the coolest time of the year. But at the foot of the Storm Mountains, in a huge house made of stone bricks, and with the constant clanging of metal knocking, the temperature is still hot. The dwarves' forging skills are very superb, and the equipment they create is of high quality and the manufacturing speed is fast enough. With a steady supply of materials, the transformed Tauren of the Wildhorn tribe have achieved full armor. Each of them was over 3 meters tall, with bulging muscles and heavy black armor. Just standing there could bring great pressure to people. But there were some problems in the forging of weapons. The dwarf blacksmiths who kept improving finally gave up the idea of plating the iron axe with steel, and instead spent a lot of effort to smelt and mix a kind of steel, hoping to make a steel axe better than the iron axe. But this tough steel is more difficult to process. Although casting saves a lot of time for hammering and shaping, the subsequent processing, grinding and overall tempering of the axe blade are much more complicated than the iron axe. Until now, the steel axes made by the dwarves working overtime are not enough for half of the minotaurs. In the sky, a huge golden figure flapped its fin-like wings extending from the sides to the tail, descending as if swimming in the air, and landed in front of Long's dragon nest. The golden dragon landed on the ground, and its body quickly changed into the appearance of a blonde human female swordsman. Vidalpin ran forward and shouted, "Fighting! Fighting!" Long N closed the wizard's notebook in front of him, and looked at Vidalpin speechlessly. "What fighting? Kirelia's little brother, your subordinate, that Ryan. Those humans are fighting with each other." In order to improve the work enthusiasm of the dwarves, Long N asked Vidalpin to go to the human town, to buy a large amount of wine and beverages. Unexpectedly, he also found out some news about the Principality of Balan. A water ball hit Vidalpin's face lightly, soaking her whole body. The thin clothes soaked in water adhered to her skin, outlining her graceful and fit figure. Not as flat as imagined. Long N looked at Vidalpin who was standing there and said lightly, "Calm down and talk slowly." Resisting the idea of fighting with Long N, Vidalpin glared at Long N and used magic to dry the clothes. All the direct heirs of the Principality of Balan have died. The ministers and nobles of the capital of Balan invited the second son of Grand Duke Leamington, changed his surname to George, and inherited the throne of Grand Duke Balan. But for some reason, those humans started fighting among themselves in the capital. Then some nobles defected to the son of Zuan George who was killed by you. Some nobles supported the coronation of the new Grand Duke of Balan, and some nobles simply refused to recognize the legitimacy of the new Grand Duke of Balan. Now the Principality of Balan is in chaos. Grand Duke Balan ordered all the nobles in the fiefdoms who supported him to immediately send troops to fight those who opposed him. Even Blackrock Town gathered 200 soldiers to participate in the crusade. Long N was not surprised after hearing what Vidalpin said. The new Grand Duke of Boran, the son of the foreign Grand Duke of Leamington, has the blood of the Goja royal family, but he has no power in Boran. Even if the nobles unanimously support him, he will only be sidelined by the great nobles and the small nobles. This is obviously not what the second prince who suddenly has the first inheritance right wants to see. In order to control power, he must win over and divide the nobles in the capital. During this period, he must take action against several families who participated in regicide and treason. He cannot just kill the chicken to scare the monkeys with the small families, otherwise he will not be able to deter those shrewd nobles. But he should be rich in theory, but not in practice. He did everything too eagerly, which made many nobles feel dangerous and afraid that they would become the next chicken to scare the monkeys. In this way, the atmosphere in the capital must be tense, like a goblin's powder keg. At this time, he only needs to issue another meaningless decree or summon a noble with a sensitive identity, and this powder keg will explode with a bang. Now it seems that this powder keg has exploded. The young Grand Duke can only bite the bullet and continue to put pressure on the nobles standing on the opposite side of him. Once his strength declines and he shows his weakness, his career as a Grand Duke will not be easy. Fortunately, he still has a father who is also a Grand Duke. As long as he is willing to pay the price, he can also rely on the power of the Principality of Leamington. Overall, the Grand Duke of Boren still has the upper hand. Long N is not too worried about Ryan and his Lionheart family, who have a blue dragon to support them, but the Lionheart family, which has greatly declined, will only become the target of the Grand Duke's wooing. With Ryan's intelligence, he will definitely hold on to this strong thigh. More than half a month has passed. Long N did not deliberately pay attention to what happened in the Principality of Boren, but someone from the Principality of Boren came to him. Long N was a little surprised when he saw the blonde girl bowing before him. "Tina, why are you here?" Tina took out a storage ring from the interlayer of her clothes and handed it to Long N, saying, "Lord Long N, Brother Ryan asked me to give this to you." Long N took the storage ring and took out the things inside, a letter and a large book made of gold. A few words were engraved on the shining golden cover. The final chapter of Element. Chapter 47. Elemental Finale. The final chapter of the Element. Long N stretched out his hand to open the golden cover, but found that the pages of the huge book were so tightly fitted that they could not be opened, as if they were originally a whole. The texture of the pages on the side was just a series of exquisite engravings. Long N looked at the golden book with interest, stretched out a claw, and scratched across the cover, but left no trace. The fact that it could remain unscathed under the claws of a real dragon was enough to explain the problem. This huge book that did not seem to be for human use obviously contained a great secret. Long N recalled the mercenaries who broke into his territory. One of them was a 6th level swordsman from a family in the capital that participated in the night attack on Lionheart Carter Castle. He was sent to kill Ryan and his sister and snatch the final chapter of the Element. Among the people he killed for Ryan, 3 were from this family. Long N put down the elemental chapter and looked at Tina. "Do you know what this is?" Tina shook her head. "Lord Long N, I just learned that there is such a secret treasure in the family. Usually, this elemental chapter is kept by each patriarch of the family, and its secret will only be told to the first heir of the family. I don't know much about this book." Long N nodded to indicate that he understood, and then opened Ryan's envelope. The content of the letter was not long, and Long N quickly read it after a glance. Ryan stated in the letter that his situation was tense. In order to prevent the elemental chapter from being taken away, he gave it to Long N for safekeeping. Then, Ryan wrote the origin and function of elemental chapter in the letter. This treasure was discovered by a legendary spellcaster ancestor of the Lionheart family in a secret place in the elemental plane, when he traveled in the elemental plane. According to the diary of that ancestor, he first entered a magnificent and huge flame palace in the fire elemental plane, and saw a book placed on a pillar in the center of the palace, which seemed to be cast in gold. But on the throne of the palace, there was a fire elemental lord who was several thousand meters tall. Perhaps he should be called the Fire Elemental Emperor. Long N's ancestor could not bring himself to resist the Silent Emperor, but the Fire Elemental Lord did not kill him. He just said to him, "Leave." In a flash, he was exiled from the Fire Elemental plane and returned to the main material world. After this incident, the legendary spellcaster ancestor developed a little fear of exploring the elemental plane and never set foot on any elemental plane again. until the last few years of his life, as if to fulfill his regrets in life, he suddenly decided to explore the elemental plane again. For this last exploration, he chose a space node that led to the wind elemental plane. But unfortunately, the node that had been discovered long ago and could stably transmit to the wind elemental plane inexplicably produced space turbulence, which dragged him into the vacuum plane formed by the overlap of the dark energy plane and the wind elemental plane. There was no breathing, no temperature, and almost no living things there. But a golden book floated quietly in front of him, exactly the same as what he had seen in the fire elemental plane many years ago. He looked around in a hurry, but he did not see another existence like the thousands-meter tall fire elemental lord. Finally, he tried to touch the golden book. The moment his fingers touched the cover of the book, the words "the end of the element" written in the common language of Onia appeared on it. Then he was in a trance for a moment, and in this moment, he returned to the prime material plane again, ending his short exploration of the elemental plane. The end of the element that his fingers touched also left the vacuum plane with him, and under the rules of the prime material plane, it fell heavily in front of him. Before he died, he put all his energy into studying the end of the element. With the last of his life, he successfully opened the first 2 pages of the end of the element, and copied 2 powerful legendary spells from it. When he died, he still regretted not getting the end of the element earlier. If he was given another 10 years, he might be able to go further than the legend. Unfortunately, after him, no heir of the Lionheart family could be promoted to legendary. Only 2 9-ring spellcasters opened the elemental end again. However, they saw completely different knowledge on the first page of elemental end from what the ancestor saw. One saw a powerful 9-ring spell, and the other saw a hidden elemental space. Elemental space is similar to elemental plane, but usually has a small range, and does not have infinite space like elemental plane. Elemental space usually contains many precious materials that can only be found in elemental planes, and there are also many dangerous life forms that can only be found in elemental planes. But generally speaking, it is much easier to obtain precious materials from it than to venture into the elemental plane. Therefore, any elemental space is a huge treasure for a family, and the value of this treasure is even worth coveting by a country. The Lionheart family once relied on powerful ancestors to build this foundation, and their descendants relied on sharing this elemental space with the royal family of Bolin to consolidate their position in the principality. Long'en's hand flashed with lightning, and the letter paper was electrocuted into a piece of charcoal powder. Will different people see different contents? I wonder what I will see when I open it. Ryan gave the end of the element to Long'en for safekeeping, which meant that Long'en could read it at will. Anyway, this book would not have any effect in their hands for the time being. No one in the Lionheart family had been able to open even 1 page of the end of the element for more than 100 years. But the effect doesn't seem to be too strong. It's just learning new spells and discovering elemental spaces. Do you need a powerful fire elemental lord who is thousands of meters tall to guard it? Or is there actually many copies of this book? Each copy has a different effect. Long'en had no way of knowing based on speculation, so he could only put the end of the element into his storage ring first. Long'en secretly decided that when he had enough strength in the future, he would definitely go to all the elemental planes. Lord Long'en, since the things have been delivered, I will return to the principality first. Tina bowed. The sister of Marquis Ren, a close minister of the current Grand Duke Boran, claimed that she was ordered by the Grand Duke to inspect the western provinces and organize an expeditionary army to fight in the northern border. She should stay in the western border and cannot disappear for too long without reason. Long'en looked at the girl in front of him who seemed immature a few months ago, but has now become mature and steady, and said silently, "Go, do what you should do." Chapter 48, Dragon Slayer Clan. Long'en put the final chapter of Element into the storage ring hidden under the scales and shook his head. A few days after Tina left, Long'en tried twice more, but both times ended in failure. This feeling of knowing that there is a treasure mountain in front of you, but it is out of reach is very uncomfortable, especially for a real dragon. Fortunately, real dragons have a long lifespan, and Long'en has enough patience to wait until his strength grows to the point where he can open this book. Corellia walked into Long N's dragon nest in human form, glanced at the treasures Long N had laid out, and walked up to Long N without changing her expression. You get used to it after seeing it many times. You're back. What's the current situation of the Principality of Boran? Long N stayed in the dragon nest all day, but sent Corellia and Videlpin out to investigate the various movements of the Principality of Boran. Real dragon scouts. Even Long N was lamenting his own luxury. But it must be said that the real dragon has first-class flying speed, almost unnoticeable flying altitude, excellent eyesight, strong self-protection ability. What other race can beat the real dragon in terms of being a scout? Moreover, if these two are sent out for reconnaissance, even if they are discovered, they can use the excuse of "I feel curious, come to take a look" to evade those humans. After all, no one will doubt the two golden dragons and silver dragons who have never interfered with the society of other intelligent creatures. Even if they are suspected, they can't do anything to them. At most, they will be temporarily imprisoned and have to be fed and well fed, unless you are ready to face the anger of two or more adult golden dragons and silver dragons. The expeditionary force of the western province has been assembled, and Tina has led the expeditionary force to the northern province of Balan. The southern province that supports Grand Duke Balan is also continuously sending troops to the capital of Balan. Relying on the troops of the southern province, they barely blocked the rebels of the northern province outside the Botilan plain. But the situation in the eastern province is a bit bad. Grand Duke Balan and Grand Duke Leamington do not seem to have reached an agreement. Leamington has stopped attacking the eastern province. Without the restraint of the Principality of Leamington, the eastern province has become a mess. Corellia frowned when she said this. When she flew over the eastern province, she saw the war everywhere. Having betrayed the Grand Duke and lost the restraint of Zuangeoj, the Marquis with troops in the eastern province had some irrational ambitions. He neither supported Zuangeoj's son nor recognized the successor Grand Duke Balan. He also gladly accepted the nobles who were liquidated by Grand Duke Balan and fled. His ambitions were obvious, and he was frantically collecting grain and taxes. Any nobles of small fiefdoms who were unwilling to accept his rule would be slaughtered by him. Countless serfs and civilians fled, or were killed in the heavy taxes and forced conscription. The once prosperous eastern province was rapidly declining. Corellia's justice and kindness made her angry, but the rules of not interfering with the human kingdom at will made her unable to do anything. The only one who could save the eastern province was the Grand Duke in the capital of Balan. But the Grand Duke obviously would not waste his strength on saving those civilians. He had to concentrate his strength and give priority to defeating the powerful rebels in the northern province. As long as the eastern province did not send troops for the time being, it would be acceptable to the Grand Duke. Humph, stupid. Long N snorted. The governor of the East Territory has gone crazy. He is trying to make a desperate attempt to overdraw all the power of the Eastern Province to fight for the position of Grand Duke. When he turns the collected property and food into combat power, he will come out when the rebels and the royal family are both injured and lose, and give them the final fatal blow. The Grand Duke of Boran should use the territory and the tax revenue of the next few years to exchange for the help of his father, the Grand Duke of Leamington, and kill the Eastern Province that has not yet expanded completely. Long N said it lightly, but whether it is ceding territory or paying future taxes, the future Duchy of Boran will be in danger. It is also a situation where there is no return if you are not careful. It is difficult for the Grand Duke of Boran to make a choice. Corellia looked at Long N with a little hesitation, and finally said, "In addition, I heard some bad news about you in the Western Province." "Oh." Long N smiled. "What's the matter?" He was really a little curious about what bad news those humans could have about him. "It is rumored that the Dragon Slayer clan is offering a bounty for you, the blue dragon that slaughtered nobles and destroyed the stability and prosperity of the human kingdom." Corellia said, "Dragon Slayer clan? What a big mouth." Long N smiled and didn't care. Long N had seen this so-called Dragon Slayer clan in the book Legendary Family Biography of the Onia continent. It was recorded in the biography because 3 of the 9 dragon slaying feats in the past 500 years were led by this family. The ones who died in their hands were a young black dragon, an adult white dragon, and an adult black dragon. The shame of the true dragon, the white dragon, naturally needs no introduction. The black dragon is also the bottom of the 5 color true dragons except the white dragon, and the adult black dragon that was killed was an unlucky one who was still injured. As for the title of Dragon Slayer clan, it was not claimed by them. No one dared to take the risk of angering all the true dragons to give themselves such a disrespectful title to the true dragons. At first, it was a compliment from others to them, and gradually it spread and became a nickname for that family. However, they must have actively promoted the spread of this name. Although they dare not anger the real dragon, they will not miss this opportunity to become famous. The information about their bounty in the mercenary guild, most likely, it is just a means for them to become famous. Just like the traffic on the internet in the previous life, they have to find a way to create hot searches. If they can't create them, they have to get on the hot topics. And the blue dragon, that descended on the capital of Boran, slaughtered the nobles, and flew to the storm mountains in the fear of the people of Boran is undoubtedly a hot topic recently. This family is far away in the Roman Empire in the northernmost part of Onia. Longen is not worried that they will really come to the door. Even if they really come to the door, Longen is not a cattle and sheep that can be slaughtered at will. If you kill a dragon, you must be prepared to be slaughtered by the dragon. The anger of the real dragon is not so easy to bear. At worst, Longen can't win. He just lies on the ground, stretches his neck, and shows the dragon scales given by Bahamut to play rogue. No matter who it is, before being able to withstand the advent of the incarnation of the platinum dragon god, they must think carefully before touching Longen. However, this also served as a reminder to Long. If some reckless man really rushed into Storm Mountains and didn't give Bahamut any face, but stabbed Long twice, he would be the one who suffered the most. Longen thought for a moment, then said to Curelia, "Thank you for your hard work. Go back and take a rest. The investigation of the Principality of Bolan cannot stop." After a pause, Longen asked tentatively, "Your father, Lord Silvereye, powerful metal dragons like them will not interfere in the wars and fights between humans. What about humans and real dragons?" Curelia said seriously, "If humans harm the metal dragons of the good camp without reason, then they will suffer the wrath of all metal dragons. As for the 5-colored dragons, excuse me for being blunt, but the 5-colored dragons are usually attacked by humans because they were at fault first, and given the relationship between metal dragons and 5-colored dragons, metal dragons generally don't get involved. This is not an ordinary situation. That is, if the red dragon is being attacked, and there is a silver dragon nearby, then the silver dragon will most likely get involved. These two real dragons are usually mortal enemies of each other, and they will naturally not miss the opportunity to take advantage of others' misfortunes." After listening to Curelia's words, Longen grinned and showed his fangs, smiled, and said, "Then I feel relieved. I have been practicing driving for 6 consecutive days. I can't hold it anymore. I told my coach to take a 2-day break first. I can update earlier tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. I don't have the energy to roll around, but I'm asking for votes." Chapter 49 Agadius. After Curelia left, only Longen was left in the dragon's nest. Longen tapped the gold coins with his fingertips, but his mind was thinking about something else. The real dragons in this world have never been invincible. Their power still has its limits. Even if a human is just like an ant in front of a real dragon, an ant can still chew up an elephant. Thousands of human troops and mercenaries broke through the dragon's nest and then killed a dozen legendary ruthless people. Even a powerful adult real dragon would have to die on the spot, no matter how strong an individual is, before he surpasses others by several levels. He will also face the risk of being bitten to death by a large force. In order to be truly safe, in addition to being strong in one's own strength, it is also important to have a fear force. Longen thought for a moment and said, "Ask Blueear, Goldfoot, and Scar to see me. Great Master, Lord of Storms, we are your servants, following your will." The 3 men, each wearing a set of fine iron armor, saluted respectfully. Blueear spoke first, with a less accent than before, and it was obvious that he was quite proud of it. Longen shook his head with a slight amusement, ignoring Blueear's thoughts, and said, "I called you here because I have something to entrust to you. How many transformed Dragon Vein kobolds are there now?" "Report to the Master. A total of 672 awakened Dragon Vein members," Goldfoot answered first, not to be outdone. Originally, it was in charge of all dragon vein kobolds, and it knew this very well. In addition, there are 212 dragon songers and 236 kobold warriors. Long N nodded slightly. 1000 kobolds is considered a strong kobold tribe, and the number of kobold warriors is only about 1/5 of them. Nearly 700 dragon vein kobolds, plus dragon singers and kobold warriors, even exceed the total population of a strong kobold tribe, which has reached Long N's expectations. My territory should be expanded. I order you to explore all the nearby kobold tribes and order them to submit to me. Long N said. After that, build an underground channel network connecting all the kobold tribes. All the places where the underground network can extend will be my territory. After these are completed, bring orders to all the tribes of intelligent creatures in the territory to submit to the Great True Dragon and the Lord of Storms. Otherwise, either leave on your own or wait for death. The three of you discuss and solve the specific details. I will let the Crazy Horn tribe cooperate with you. The three kobolds were all excited, as if Long N expanded his territory, they could also reap the glory. Yes. Great Master Wolf. Great Wolf Stormlord Wolf. Long N waved his hand to let them retreat, and called the Fire Lizard Dragon. Soon, the Fire Lizard Dragon, whose body and limbs were still short and thick, but had dragon horns and dragon wings, slowly flew into Long N's dragon nest. The small wings behind it flapped rapidly, but it really couldn't carry its huge and bloated body, so it not only lacked the majesty of a real dragon, but also made people feel funny. The Fire Lizard Dragon flew close to Long N, but did not dare to look up at Long N. It slowly landed on the ground and lay down, saying respectfully, "Great Master, I'm here." Long N looked at the Fire Lizard Dragon, who was respectful and obedient after being slapped, and smiled silently. How does it feel to transform into a real dragon? The fire lizard lying on the ground seemed to remember the price of its previous arrogance. It shuddered and said, "Great Master, your blood has given me powerful strength, but compared with you, my strength is still insignificant. I'm just a pseudo-dragon with some wisdom, and dare not usurp the name of a real dragon." Long N stopped teasing it and asked, "Are you speaking fluently?" The fire lizard bowed its head deeply. "Yes, Great Master, your blood has given me the honor of possessing 1/10,000,000th of your wisdom. I can use dragon language proficiently, and even learn spells." "Oh." Long N raised his eyebrows. "Where did you learn the spells from?" The fire lizard did not dare to hide it and said, "Your servant Glengo is teaching me spells, Great Master." Long N nodded slightly, and did not ask any more questions. He just said lightly, "I know you are dissatisfied and ambitious. Don't rush to defend yourself." Long N stopped the fire lizard that was about to speak in a panic. "I don't care about your disrespect for me, nor do I care about your ambition. I just need you to know that you are just a mutated fire lizard. Compared with a real dragon, you are nothing. But if you continue to be loyal to me, one day in the future, you may be able to rival a real dragon, and it is not impossible to even step on other real dragons." Long N looked at the fire lizard quietly, and the fire lizard respectfully ate the pie he drew. "Great Master, I'm willing to follow you, as a continuation of your wingspan and claws, and conquer everything for you." Long N didn't care whether the fire lizard's attitude was sincere. He just stretched out his front paws and placed them flat on the fire lizard's lowered head, between the two small dragon horns. "Since you already have the qualities of a true dragon, you should no longer live like a beast." A burst of lightning burst out from Long's claws, startling the fire lizard dragon, which tensed up all over, but did not resist. "Your master, Long Doragon Ferenga, Angaston Morn, hereby grants you your true name, Egadius." The claws covering Egadius's head flashed with lightning, and after slowly removing it, a dark mark was left on Egadius's forehead. It could be vaguely seen that it was a real dragon flying in the midst of lightning, with a slight smell of burning coming out from between its scales. But Egadius was unaware of this, and just stood there stupidly. After a long while, Egadius finally lowered his head to the ground respectfully, lowered his eyes, and said gratefully, "Great Master, your servant, Egadius, will always humbly serve at your feet." For it, the recognition of the true name is far more willing to submit than the pie that Long N painted. Although it cannot obtain the knowledge and abilities inherited in the blood of the true dragon through the true name like a real dragon. although the form and nature of Longen's granting of the true name are more like the human king placing a sword on the shoulder of a knight to confer a title. Although this process is so simple and casual, but it finally has its own name, the name that lives as a real dragon, Egadius. Longen looked at Egadius with satisfaction, and after letting it cooperate with the dog-headed man to conquer more clans for it, he waved his hand and said, "Go, learn spells, become stronger, and conquer for me." Egadius' huge bulging eyes flashed with an inexplicable brilliance and said, "Great master, Egadius, listen to my orders." Chapter 50, Jackal. With the arrival of winter, the snow line on the top of the Storm Mountain range extends downward, and the water level of the river formed by the melting snow also drops a lot. Wow. Boom. A huge iron hoof stepped into the calm river, stirring up a wave of waves. Then, a group of burly and majestic minotaurs in full armor ran past, trampling the river with the water level dropping almost to the point of stopping. Nearly 100 minotaurs wearing black iron armor, holding huge black silver-lined steel axes in their hands, still walked briskly. In front of all the minotaurs, Sorta, who was 4 meters tall and had blood-red hair, was particularly conspicuous. "Stop." Sorta gestured and gave the order, and the running minotaurs braked in unison, rolling up dry mud and dust. In the dust, bushes, and shadows, bloodthirsty and warlike eyes lit up, but looking at the minotaurs, they were cautious and shrinking. A tall, muscular, but slender and agile humanoid creature wearing tattered iron armor walked out of the bushes. This humanoid creature had a wolf-like face, ferocious fangs in its mouth, and messy, dry, tangled grey-black hair all over its body. It was still 2 meters tall with a hunched back, and wore various bone daggers, serrated knives, throwing knives, and awls on its waist. It held a rusty scimitar tightly in its hand, and looked up at Sorta, who was twice its height. It was not that it had never seen minotaurs before, and even slaughtered a minotaur tribe of dozens of people, but the minotaurs in front of it. They were incredibly well equipped and their size was beyond its imagination. It had already thought of retreating, but as the leader of the Gnolls, weakness was the most fatal performance. Once the leader showed signs of fatigue, the young and strong Gnolls would rush up and tear the leader to pieces or expel him, and then compete for a new, more powerful leader. Therefore, it had to stand up and stand in front of this group of giant minotaurs. Sorta looked at the Gnolls in front of him with disdain and disgust. If their great master did not need more followers, he would have ordered to flatten this tribe of Gnolls without hesitation. Now, in the master's territory, only this group of Gnolls has not surrendered. After the kobolds scouted, they handed this relatively dangerous target to them. Without waiting for the Gnoll leader to speak, Sorta made a rumbling voice, "By the order of my lord, the great lord of storms, surrender, or die." In the shadows of the forest, the threatening low whine of the dog came. This straightforward declaration was an insult and provocation to the Gnolls, which made the bloodthirsty and warlike Gnolls unbearable. They showed their claws and took up weapons, but their leader was surprisingly silent. This female in her prime ascended to the position of leader by her powerful force. She led a tribe of nearly 1,000 Gnolls. For Gnolls who usually prefer to live in grasslands and deserts, a tribe of 1,000 people in such a mountainous area is a remarkable achievement. They enslaved kobolds and goblins, domesticated forest wolves, and their wolf cavalry was swift and brutal, using large tracts of woodland as their hunting grounds. All creatures in this forest were just pieces of meat with legs that could escape in front of them. But it was not one of those guys who only had brute force. It had always been a cautious and smart Gnoll. The long-term prosperity of the tribe did not make it lose its reason and keen sense of danger. Recently, within their hunting range, one tribe after another of intelligent creatures have surrendered to a being called the Lord of Storms. At first, it was disdainful of this guy who recruited kobolds and goblins, but the arrival of this group of terrifying minotaurs changed its mind. What kind of existence can have such a minotaur army? Suddenly, a large shadow was cast in the sky. A huge, short-limbed, and somewhat deformed red dragon hit the ground heavily, causing the Gnolls to sway. The Gnoll leader stared at the red dragon in front of him. Although it looked strange, there was no doubt that it had dragon horns and dragon wings. Its eyes were full of wisdom, rather than the ferocity of a wild beast, and the faint dragon power in the air all proved that it was a real dragon. It seemed that this was the Lord of the Storm. The Gnarl leader was, as if he was facing a great enemy, but he heard the strange red dragon say, "My great lord, the Lord of Storms and Thunder, orders you to submit to his dragon wings, and make your choice, Gnarls." The Gnarl leader was shocked. The huge red dragon in front of him was just a minion of the Lord of the Storm. Only a more powerful dragon could make a real dragon obey his orders. It made a decision in its heart in an instant, and immediately knelt on one knee and said, "The Fang clan is willing to submit to the great Lord of Storms." This move made the rest of the Gnarls explode, roaring and barking in anger. But the Gnarl leader lowered his head, as if he didn't hear it. Sorta glanced at the Gnarl leader, raised his axe and waved it. "Take them back to the Master's dragon nest, and those who disobey will be killed directly." The Minotaurs strode forward, and the dull footsteps and the collision of armor passed by the Gnarl leader, and then mixed with the roars, howls, and screams of the Gnarls. The Gnarl leader knelt on the ground quietly, as if he didn't realize it, and had no mercy on those of his own people who died tragically. In the world of Gnarls, only the strong prey on the weak. The weak, especially the weak who are not smart enough, have no right to survive. Choosing to resist, or escape and being killed, is because of their own original sin of weakness, and no one else can be blamed. Sorta stepped on the short Gnarl in front of him, crushing its ribs. Blood flowed out of its mouth and nose. He swung the steel axe in his hand, and chopped off its head, ending this one-sided massacre. Behind the Minotaurs were more than 600 Gnarls. They were not necessarily smarter than the dead Gnarls, but they could only see the difference in power between them, and the Minotaurs more clearly. Submission to the strong was also the way for the Gnarls to survive. Sorta picked up a half-remaining Gnarl corpse, and wiped the blood off the armor and weapons with its fur. "Bring your people and the things you want to take away, and follow me." Sorta threw away the Gnarl in his hand, which was like a rag, and led the Minotaurs to the direction of the dragon's nest. They finally completed their master's mission. In Long's territory, there was no more tribe of intelligent creatures that were not his family. The area of tens of thousands of square kilometers between the Storm Mountains and the Principality of Boron was covered by Long's wings. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.